when we kind of talked about what Meta's doing in the world of virtual reality and talking to her about their impact on nonprofits. And it's amazing what Meta is doing in this world and really taking VR from just a game to something that really provides value, particularly to the folks that we serve at Vehicles for Change, and I know a lot of the folks that you serve. So, Beth, we're happy to have you here from all the way from England and being our keynote. So please welcome Beth Murray, the global lead for nonprofits with Meta.
Thank you so much, Marty, and thank you to all the Vehicles for Change team who are doing incredible things with technology. I'm going to share a slide with you now. I'm going to talk to you for about 20 minutes. I promise there's some interesting stuff in there. There's a Q&A at the end as well with Marty. So if you do have questions or comments or anything you need clarification on, please do just pop that in the chat and we should be able to cover that right at the end. Firstly, to introduce myself, as Marty said, I am Global Lead for Nonprofits in Meta Reality Labs. Now, some of you may know Meta. We are the part of they're an organization that covers projects and tools like Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram. But at Reality Labs, we're the part of Meta that thinks about developing and emerging technologies. What kind of technologies are going to change the world today, but also 10 years in the future? We're focused on building what we call the world's next computing platform, what you might know as the metaverse. I've got a special interest in what we're talking about today because before I joined Meta, I worked across my nonprofits myself and specifically criminal justice nonprofits, but also in businesses and education, including banking. So hopefully there'll be some relevance there. But my work is always focused on organizational change, communications and technology, and today intersects all three. The aim today is to help us think differently about technology in the workforce. But to do that, I'm going to explain what the metaverse is. Then I'm going to talk about the kinds of technologies you can use to access it. And finally, I'm going to give you some practical examples of how organizations across the world and nonprofits like Vehicles for Change are using these kind of technologies to build and support their workforce. But before we do any of that, I'm going to start with a history lesson because technology has evolved fast over the last 5 decades. If you think about 50 years ago, we had the large site-specific computers. By the 80s, we had dial-up connectivity. 20 years later, we've got access to the mobile internet through smartphones and tablets, so we can take our connections with us. But when we got phones with cameras, the internet became visual and mobile. We started to use video as a richer way to share things. The metaverse is simply the next version of that internet. It's going to enable those richer connections. So far, our relationship with the internet has been looking at it. Think about your relationship with your phone, your laptop, your computer. Those interactions are flat and framed and fixed, almost always brokered by a screen. We have to choose between our devices, looking at the information, or our environment, what's going on in the world around us. But our belief is that from now on, you're going to experience it. You're going to be a part of it. We see this barrier between what's going on the screen and what's going on around us dissolving over time, as technology allows us to enhance the world around us whilst remaining completely present. And we also believe that you're going to be able to access these experiences from many devices with a different level of definition. Some of those devices exist today and others have not even been dreamt up yet. We believe this is going to be the basis of a new kind of computing platform as revolutionary as the PC and the internet itself. Because we believe in the future, you're going to be able to experience not just any place or any time, past, present, or future. I want you to think for a minute back to your school days, how you would get your information from a teacher standing in front of you or from a textbook. Now imagine the potential for education. Imagine you're doing your history exams, but now you can experience standing on the streets of ancient Rome. You can hear the sounds, you can visit the local market to get a sense of what life was like all that time ago. Imagine if you're a health researcher studying heart defects, and imagine you are able to view a 3D image of the human heart. You can take it apart, you can explore the vascular system and come up with new ideas for treatment and surgery. Both of those examples are real and they are happening today. I think if you have skepticism, it's important to remember this isn't the first time in our lives that we've experienced a significant shift in computing platforms. And each generational shift in technology tends to come with a side order of skepticism. Remember the famous outcry when Henry Ford tried to create the car the first time. In 1994, so that's less than 30 years ago, experts and the general public believed the internet was hyped because it's hard to understand and because they'd never seen or experienced it before. This technology has huge value for connection. You can hop into a virtual concert from Japan to meet your friend who lives in Los Angeles or Baltimore. Or you can play a game of virtual chess with a friend who lives 200 miles away. It's really important to state that the metaverse is never going to replace physical interaction. It's not going to be a replacement for our experience in daily life. It's not going to be a replacement from a hug from your mum any more than the internet is today. But it's going to be able to build on that connection the internet enables so we can have a richer experience. Today, I'm here to talk to you about how organizations are using the metaverse to transform how they work. So collaboration, education and training, and program delivery. But before I do that, let's delve into the technology itself a little more so we're all on the same page. We're going to talk about virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality, or VR, AR, MR. Virtual reality, which we'll hear quite a bit about today, is the use of computer technology to create a completely immersive simulated environment, which can be explored in 360 degrees. You enter a new world and you're completely immersed by it. In VR, you can interact with a virtual object or environment in a seemingly real way by using devices and equipment like headsets, pressure-sensitive gloves, or bodysuits that let you see and feel the virtual world as though you're actually immersed in it. VR creates a sensation of being present in a virtual three-dimensional environment, allowing you to interact and manipulate objects. Virtual reality exposure therapies is already successful in treating patients with PTSD, phobias, and other anxiety-related disorders by exposing individuals to anxiety and traumatic memories. In VR sessions, a therapist can ask a patient to return to the pivotal or traumatic experiences that cause that trauma and talk about them. So, for instance, the Department of Defense, they work with VR. They work with doctors, psychotherapists, psychiatrists, and in those safe spaces, soldiers who've experienced trauma can relive that trauma in a way that helps them process it and leads to better outcomes. Because as patients confront that fear and other feelings stirred up by the memories, it helps them to soften that sense of danger within the safety of a therapy room. It's that real. Augmented reality, or AR, is a technology that overlays digital images or animations on a user's view of the real world. So it's enhancing or augmenting reality. You may already have used augmented reality in your daily life. For example, if you've bought furniture online, you may have been given the option to view the product in 3D in your house, or placing the virtual object in your living room. Or if you've ever used a filter on your Instagram stories or your Facebook stories, if you've ever put one of those makeup or mask filters over your face, then you've used augmented reality. Here's a little example to bring that to life. We partnered with World Health Organization Academy on an augmented reality course that teaches healthcare workers how to safely take on and take off personal protective equipment, which is a skill urgently needed during the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. The AR PPE course is a 20-minute augmented reality learning experience available to WHO workers through the mobile app. It demonstrates and tests health workers with the help on the proper way to put on and take off PPE with the help of a virtual nurse demonstrating proper technique. And it was instrumental in scaling out, teaching people how to put on this PPE properly in a way that was engaging and worked. Finally, we have mixed reality. Now, I want you to think of this as a combination of augmented reality and virtual reality, and it brings this immersive technology to life. how it works is you can experience the benefits of virtual reality. So you have very immersive objects, but you also have pass-through technology. You can see the virtual objects in front of you, but you can also see the real world around you. And you can switch from being in virtual reality, totally immersive, to being in mixed reality, where you can see the real world around you. So you might be asking, how does this relate to the workplace? So for the first time, hybrid working has become mainstream, as many people are taking meetings at their kitchen table as in the office. And we've got this great opportunity to reimagine what collaboration looks like. We believe this technology is going to lead to a more flexible and equitable working culture. Because as technology has evolved, so is the way we learn. Back to the history lessons, in the 80s, if you were curious about something, you looked it up in the encyclopedia, and you might have been lucky to get one paragraph and a picture. In the 90s, if any of you are as old as me, you may remember using the CD-ROMs, putting them into the computer, or starting to get information from that dial-up on the internet via desktop computers. More recently, with our mobiles, we have got access to the world from our pockets, allowing us to browse the internet whenever we're curious. The next step in this progression is immersive learning through metaverse core technologies. And some kind of industries have been using this technology for years. Pilots have been learning to fly in simulation machines, avoiding damage to expensive planes. We don't take a new pilot and immediately put them running a plane. Doctors learn to practice surgery without any patients present. For companies with a geographically distributed workforce, perhaps people that aren't all based in the same office, VR is a cost-effective way to scale training, improve performance, and increase retention of new skills. You can practice the same scenarios again and again and again and track how well they're working. It also prepares workers to handle real-life situations before they encounter them. So that might help businesses with customer service. It can reduce bias in recruiting. It can spot potential hazards in manufacturing, and in some cases even save lives. The images you're seeing here are from the retailer Walmart, which puts 2.5 million sales colleagues through immersive training every year to improve their skills ahead of the busy holiday season. And I'm working with an aid charity in the States right now, building immersive training for their workers going into dangerous situations to ensure everyone has the same high level of training, no matter where in the world they are deployed to. We see mixed reality driving business outcomes across 4 key areas. The first is learning and training. So companies that are simulating real world scenarios. People who do dangerous jobs like firefighters and airline pilots can practice in safe spaces, including the soft skills training I talked a little about, diversity and inclusion, onboarding new hires, and customer role play engagements. But some stats from PwC believes that virtual reality learners are 4 times more focused when learning and complete the training 4 times faster too. The second is creativity and design. So think about being an architect or being somebody building information modeling, where you can literally build the buildings in front of you and explore them, see where weaknesses are. The third is meetings and collaboration, where technology is able to transfer you into a deep immersive experience, allowing for better collaboration versus a video call. The picture you're seeing on your screen here is of the technology commentator Lex Friedman trying out our newest version of an avatar. He's on the left in the headset, and the avatar of the sea in the technology is on the right. It's extremely realistic. The final outcome is building community. Mixed reality giving employees the way to discover their co-workers easily and have co-working spaces where they can work or relax in through the day. I'm going to briefly share the mixed reality journey of Pfizer, the pharmaceutical company. If you jump back to 2020, we're in the middle of a global lockdown. For Pfizer, they are running to find a vaccine that's going to save millions of lives and help the world return to normal. Their vaccine was approved in 2020, but that was just the beginning. Because once a vaccine was approved, they had to manufacture billions of doses of this drug, and they had to do it fast. So training hundreds of new operators, but their factory line was operating under strict guidelines, and they were not able to train on the floor. So what they did is they decided to use the MetaQuest in order to start training people in a practical but less pressured environment. They had limited access to the physical space, so they built a digital twin environment, an immersive environment where they were able to train their people. They deployed 500 Quest 2 devices, and they translated a 100-page training manual into a set of VR training apps. And they allowed people to start training and doing these repeated tasks outside of their factory lines so they could get trained faster and more practically. It meant they met their commitment to manufacture more than 4.5 billion doses of the vaccine. By implementing VR in just one of their global supply areas, they were able to reduce training time by 40%. That translated to a per trainee savings of 23K versus non-VR training. And importantly, 87% of those that were trained voted to prefer being trained in VR. For those nonprofits in the room, I want you to think about the potential revolution to the services you provide, because nonprofits that exist to get people into work, like Vehicles for Change, are already delivering job simulations and work experience to calm nerves and train beneficiaries. I work with a lot of healthcare nonprofits who are providing immersive experiences of what treatment might look and feel like, which improves patient satisfaction and outcomes. We are almost at the end of our jam-packed session today. It's very much a whistle-stop tour of the metaverse, and I hope that it's been useful. It's incredibly hard to fit into one session. It's a new technology, and many people are still working it out and working out whether it will work for them. It's absolutely fine if your strategy is wait and see, but you should be thinking about it because the metaverse belongs to you. This technology is coming, it is being adopted. You need to think about how you're going to work with it. I'm going to leave you with a film made by one of our partners. It tells the story of Josh and how VR helped him to thrive.
At a younger age, I used to get into a lot of trouble.
Can anybody quickly tell me, are you able to hear that?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Hanging out with the wrong crowd, coming home late, underage drinking, and things like that. It's very easy to get lost in something negative if you don't have a positive purpose.
That looks good now, buddy. Just need a little piece of that right there.
When I was about 15 years old, I started HVAC repair, helping my dad. I didn't really enjoy it at all.
I remember the time when I couldn't pay you to get into an attic.
But I was always into games. So once my dad came home with the Interplay curriculum and he showed me, hey Josh, you can do your HVAC training inside of the MetaQuest. And I was like, man, this is pretty cool. This is just like the job that we're on. Interplay learning is like having another instructor. And it took my gaming experience and turned it to a training experience, and it's actually fun. First thing that you want to do is test if there's any current going through the wires. Fast forward 2.5 years later, now I'm a teacher here at TCI. You measured it, 0 amps there. So now look back at your checklist. I've worked with young people, I've worked with older people, and everybody seems to enjoy it. Good job, you just fixed you a condenser unit. We also help guys who are coming out of correctional facilities. We give them the opportunity to learn a skill, giving them a sense of purpose, ultimately becoming solid members of the community. So when the yellow gets energized, if this is on yellow, what's gonna happen to that?
It's gonna be energized.
Yep. The Quest is it's a great tool to be able to actually be in such an immersive experience. Everything that you can do out here, you can do right there in the virtual reality. Good to go.
Good deal.
Everyone makes mistakes. It makes me feel great to know that I'm giving someone else a second chance just like I was given.
Thank you for your time. Marty, did you have any questions that you wanted to ask?
Yeah, Beth, I think we do have some questions, and that was amazing. I do have to mention that I think you threw our audience a curve when you mentioned the encyclopedia. I don't know how many of them went running to their phones and typed in an encyclopedia to figure out what they were. I'm certainly old enough to remember that. So, VR, you're in the nonprofit world, as am I here in the United States. And when I first started getting into this, I thought there would be a lot more acceptance and a lot more people use. Why do you think, what are the drawbacks, and why do you think it's still taking time to be accepted? Because it's an amazing tool.
I think that's a really good question. And we have a saying here at Meta, which is heads in headsets. I think it's really, really hard to adequately do justice to the experience and to you yourself as have had that experience. The greatest acceptance we're seeing in the business community is often people who have been at home and have used their kids' headsets. Their kids have got really excited because gaming on the headsets are really exciting. There's loads of content and applications that younger people will use. People will put those on and they will become advocates, right? They will become huge fans of it, and they will go into it, and suddenly a million light bulbs go off when they realize the potential for their own organization, for their business. So I think really it's got to be about heads and headsets. We remember when the internet came out, we had no sense of what it could be or how exciting it was. It was just something you could go on to like ask Jeeves to find, to essentially use it exactly like we did the encyclopedia, but through typing. We've got to give it time. We're right at the beginning of the new technology. We've got to give it time. We've got to get heads and headsets, and then I think we're going to see a lot more growth.
Yeah, again, I am a firm believer that this is the way that we're going to train the future workforce. One other question for you that came in is what are kind of the cost implications, and how does using VR really impact the cost of training that you've seen?
I'm so sorry. Could you repeat the last bit of that question?
How does VR impact the overall cost of training programs?
So I think we've got to look at this in two ways. First of all, it's what's the cost of acquiring a curriculum? So if you're going to go and build something out totally from scratch, that's going to cost some money. It's not going to cost loads of money, but that's going to cost some money. But secondly, we're seeing great impacts. I think I shared some statistics in there by PwC. We're seeing great impact in driving down long-term training costs because it's so immersive, and because people are actively choosing to do and redo the curriculums. You're seeing that you're having far greater success rates, and therefore people are having to do effectively less repeated training to get the outcome you need.
That's excellent. Thank you. I am going to put on the spot one more time, and I don't know if you have these statistics, but I remember Beth, when we did the showcase, and one of your other folks was on the Schmidt Future Showcase with us. We had some statistics about the quality of training and how much better it is actually than book learning or even hands-on training. You don't happen to have those statistics, do you?
No, Marty, you've absolutely put me on the spot, and I will give a shout out to my colleague Dan Nieves, who I believe was on that with you, and he is an absolute statistics head. So fair play to him. I will get his statistics and I will share them with you afterwards. But take a quick Google on that one. I recommend to everybody in this, because the outcomes of the quality of learning are significantly higher. That's because when you're in immersive training like virtual reality, your brain believes that you are in that space. You are not learning in the same way that it would be if you're reading it off a flat screen, or you are looking in a book, or you're hearing about it. Your brain is undergoing exactly the same kind of processing as it would be if you were in that HVAC attic, if you were in that mechanic's garage, learning how to do the thing. It's learning by doing. We've always known that's the best way to learn, and you're able to do that, I think, in virtual reality.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, and it kind of takes away those distractions from the world. You can't hear the outside world. You are 100%. And we hear that a lot from our students at Vehicles for Change who are using VR. So, Beth, thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us.
I've seen another couple of questions come in on the chat. Do we have time to cover those very briefly?
Absolutely.
So one of the questions it asked is, can VR be used by itself? Do you need to use VR to support another curriculum? That's a really fantastic question. So yes, the answer is virtual reality can be used by itself. You know, you have a headset, and doing that you can access, think of the headset as your computer. You can then access the internet, which is all of the content that exists out there. You can often access that. You can watch your movies. You can undergo training which exists out there. One training I was doing today was the American Heart Association, who have put together some CPR training, which exists now in the metaverse. You can go on and you can learn how to save somebody's life in VR. Or lots of training exists. Bespoke training for your organization, you might need to create that yourself. But if you're talking about diversity and inclusion training, if you're talking about lots of other soft skills training, that all exists. You also don't have to spend a lot of money. So I work with one international aid charity who is helping resettle refugees into America. They have developed a program where they have a $300 camera. They walk around public spaces with it, going into hospitals, going into high schools, going onto buses. They then play those films in VR for new Americans who come over here, and their confidence in then accessing those public spaces is exponentially increased, way more than if they were told, hey, don't be scared to go and access healthcare. Hey, don't be scared to get on a bus. It's fine. Don't be scared about your first day in high school, because they already believe they've been there. That costs them very little money and is a huge impact on their program. So don't think that you have to go and spend a lot of money. You can do test and learn. You can work out what works for you. You can get a headset and try out different content, see if there's a way it works for your program. And the final question I saw was around children being early adopters of new technologies. Are we currently engaged with nonprofits that align with children such as the Girl Scouts? Well, first of all, we have got an age limit on our headsets, and so we work with age-appropriate organizations. But yes, I work with organizations like the Girl Scouts across the world. We work with young people's organizations to make sure that their voices are heard in the development of the technology, and that the technology developed is useful for them. That's all that I can see so far. So thank you, Marty, for your time.
Thank you very much. We greatly appreciate it.
Take
Beth
care.
Murray from Meta, thank you. Appreciate it. So went up in a little bit out vehicles for change, what we're here and why we're doing this. Obviously, you hopefully saw the video. This is our 25th anniversary year, and we felt like that it was important that we share kind of the expertise that we've learned and all bring together experts really all over the world to be part of this event. Give you a little bit of background. I am the president and founder. I launched Vehicles for Change back in 1999, really to address the issue that low-income families have in gaining and maintaining employment. That's transportation. And so we've awarded over 8,000 cars to families since 1999. But in 2016, we launched what we call the Full Circle Auto Repair and Training Center, where we train individuals to be auto technicians. This is a hands-on brick and mortar location. We have 3 of those across the state of Maryland, 1 in San Diego. They are incredibly successful, but we've had a lot of experience in training technicians. That program has an 85% placement rate, less than a 1.5% recidivism rate, and people are going into jobs that are very high-paying, career-leading positions. As COVID hit us, we had to decide what can we do to expand our program. And we were also hearing from employers across the country that there was a huge need for auto technicians, and how can you train more people? Fortunately, one of our panelists, Jeff Bund, who is on our board of directors, and I sat down and had some conversation. Jeff convinced me, because of his background in virtual reality, that this was the way to go, and this is what we should do in order to extend our reach and to make this program more valuable. I did ask Beth a question about cost. It cost us in our hands-on brick-and-mortar locations more than $18,000 to train one to be an auto technician. Using our virtual reality, we can train people for less than $1,000 a person. So the cost impact is enormous. I want to show you a little video that CNN aired about 3 weeks ago. We actually launched a virtual reality training in a Maryland women's prison, and it's the first time, as we can know, that has been used in a prison anywhere in the United States.
You get to escape from this place, and it reminds you that there is something outside of here.
Definitely takes you out of here. It's fun.
This is Megan and Tiffany. Both are serving time here at the Maryland Correctional Institution for Women. Tiffany expects to be released this June, Megan next year. But for all of the freedoms beyond the facility's walls, their backgrounds will likely create significant challenges for them, like finding a good-paying job.
Some of us complain about going to work on Mondays and things like that. You really miss just simple things like making your own money.
Both women are part of a program here in Maryland that uses cutting-edge virtual reality training. The goal? To put them on a path towards becoming certified auto technicians.
I feel 100% confident in my abilities.
Trade groups say the industry sees tens of thousands of job openings go unfilled each year.
So when you first put the headset on, it looks just like an automotive shop. You're able to maneuver around the shop, pick up different tools, use the lift, look under the car. It's very realistic.
Whenever we turn it on, we're not where we was. It's real. You got this headset on, it's like you're actually there.
What have you learned in your first week?
I know how to do oil change, so that's not something I ever thought I would be able to do.
I mean, virtual reality, number one, is going to be the way we train the skilled trades in 5 years across the board.
Martin Schwartz is the president of Vehicles for Change, the nonprofit group that helped bring the VR training program to Maryland's correctional facilities in 2023.
This isn't rocket science. It's a matter of getting people a job that leads to a career and we can keep people out of prison. That first 4 months is vitally important for that individual to be able to stay out of prison. So if they can get a job that's going to pay $16 to $20 an hour, we can change the trajectory of that recidivism rate.
It's dire that we get some type of training.
Sometimes we just need that one program to have faith in us and give us an opportunity and let us take the ball and run with it. I'm just trying to be self-sufficient and be a strong, independent woman.
And I'm excited. I'm excited for it. So I'm excited to be able to go home and use what we have here.
Welcome back. So we have an amazing panel of speakers, experts in the field from actually all over the world. And I'm going to give them I'm going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about virtual reality. But also when you guys jump into this and you introduce, start with, what do you see is the real value for virtual reality in training this future workforce that is in need individuals? And we'll start with Craig, with you, Craig Fraley. Craig, go ahead.
Thanks so much. Hello, everyone. For me, my background in this industry has been working with students in the trenches, setting up VR labs to ensure that we do get, as our guest speaker said, headsets on people. And one of the major benefits, there are many, but one of the major benefits is confidence. Most learners, when they start out in the real life, are brand new to a skill and they lack confidence. In VR, people aren't watching you. Your level of confidence goes way up because you're not being judged. You can make mistakes, try again, have what we call deliberate practice, and you don't feel as anxious as if you were in the real world. And I'm sure the rest of the panel will talk about some of the other key factors that make this medium, VR, so powerful. Thank you.
That's a great comment. You know, confidence is a huge piece in getting better in anything you do. And able to do it in VR and be able to do it over and over again. I agree with you. It's incredibly powerful. We also have with Jeff Crawford, who is the Vehicles for Change Vice President, Virtual Reality. Jeff?
Hey, Marty. It's me, Jeff Bund. I'm not Jeff Crawford, but I'm also happy to be here. I'm a big believer in virtual reality training, and it's been really great to watch this program grow and take off. And one of the things that I think of as a huge benefit for VR is the ability to bring it other places. So we've seen it, even on this call, some of the technical difficulties of setting up conference rooms or large training spaces. And I think the footprint and flexibility of VR really adds to that.
And this is the other Jeff.
Thanks, go
This
on.
is the other.
Jeff C.
Sorry about that. But I would agree with Jeff Bunn as well. I think what I really valued about being in this seat is we've had 6 different types of customers that have experienced this, and they've all had some of the same things to say. And I think the number one thing I've learned about this technology that I think has been fantastic is how myopic and how focused you can get in the headset. I really think that everyone is also being able to concentrate and be able to be single focused. I know Marty had mentioned that earlier, but I believe that has been one of the biggest surprises on the feedback that I've gotten from all of our customers.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. And our last panelist is actually on the other side of the coin. Chris is actually a developer, and Chris was very with HTX Labs developed the training program for vehicles for change. But Chris, you also do this for the air. So can you talk a little bit about your background and what you've done in development, and then what you see really is the view for virtual training?
Thanks so much, Marty. Really appreciate the invitation. Really excited to be here, especially with this group of panelists. Like Marty said, my name is Chris Ferret. I'm the president and CTO at HTX Labs. And briefly, my background for almost 25 years, I've been focused on enterprise software development across a range of startups and small businesses. And in early 2017, we founded HTX Labs, and we've been working with Vehicles for Change for almost at least more than half of that duration. And what we set out to do was to build an enterprise software approach to virtual reality training. And what that really means is combining all of the goodness of VR, and I would say more broadly XR, and if listening to Beth talk about augmented reality, mixed reality, sort of catch-all for that would be extended reality or XR. The things that everybody tends to gravitate towards, the immersiveness of the training, the gamification, the increased effectiveness of learning by doing, being able to make mistakes for free, could go on, et cetera, et cetera. Combining that with a software platform approach that is really grounded in standards and best practices that make this approachable, scalable, and also sustainable. So all the aboves, if you will. So we've done a lot of work with Vehicles for Change. They've been a fantastic partner with a wonderful mission. Marty also, I think, mentioned we've done a lot of work with the United States Air Force, with the Department of Defense. One of the areas of demand signal that we've seen is from really high consequence training environments, whether it's automotive maintenance or aircraft maintenance. Marty, you asked about the value of training the future workforce, and I think a lot of it has already been said, but I would add on that I think it's what the future workforce expects. The so-called digital natives that have grown up with this technology, it's familiar to them, it appeals to them, it makes learning fun. We've seen this with our military customers, we've seen this with our commercial private industry customers, and everywhere in between. The generation that's just coming into the workforce, they pick this up almost immediately, intuitively. And as every month, every year goes by, it's normalizing this technology more so. I think a question for Beth was what you asked her, what is one of the things that's still inhibiting this? And I think she mentioned the word time, and I think that's spot on. Every year that goes by, this is becoming more normalized, and the new workforce is benefiting from it increasingly so, especially with the democratization of access to it, which I think is very relevant to the Vehicles for Change mission. I'll pause there and not ramble on too long on the first question.
No, Chris, that was great. And I think one of the key words mentioned there was fun. And I do believe that VR training makes learning fun. Hopefully it's not just because it's so new, but I do think that it makes training a lot more fun. I know that as Vehicles for Change takes the VR around to new locations, we hear a lot. You can't aim people. You will use virtual reality. They've got to get their hands dirty. I'm going to kind of throw it out to start with Jeff Crawford. Jeff, because you've heard that same thing. how do we address that as a community? And how do our folks that are in the audience address if they're going to adopt this kind of training, because they're going to hear the same thing? And then anybody else that wants to jump in there, please do so.
Thank you. Yeah, I just think that this is a disruptive technology, right? It's something that's new. When Beth talked earlier, when Meta talks about it, trying to transform from being a gaming tool to a tool that's used for education and for good. And I think that the original brand, which is great, that Meta did with this technology is make it gamified. And I think ultimately that's going to be the thing that makes it great. But it's attached to things that aren't attached to real world applications. So once you get people in, and I think what Beth said was heads in headsets. And what I've experienced, the more people that we get in heads and headsets and they actually experience the technology, Marty makes sure anytime we're with the customer, he demands that we get them in a headset, because I always say it's trying to like explain what sugar tastes like. I can't do it unless you get into the headset. And so once people get into it and once they actually get into the technology, like the young lady said in the CNN interview, you're gone. And then that's when the learning and that's when it starts to really have its value and its effect. So I think that's been my experience so far. I think that's a general across the board.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think, well,
go ahead. No, go ahead, Greg.
Chris, I was actually gonna tell of the time we first met, but when about 8 years ago, when Chris and I first met, I remember they put me in a training experience that was pumping hydrogen peroxide out of a freight train car. And the thing that stuck with me about that is I was immediately bought in on VR as a training methodology, because to this day, I remember the discrete steps that you need to take to do all of it. And I don't think I've ever been imprinted like that through any other form of training. And the conclusion that I came to, and I think, people could have different opinions about this as we go, was that I don't think that I could have stepped on site and done the task. But by the time I got on site, the amount of background foundational knowledge that I would have to do the task would have sped up the training incredibly, because I already would have understood what we were doing, understood the process, and I would have been immediately focusing on the things that can only be delivered on site. So I thought of it immediately as a way of putting more people through more training more efficiently. And maybe there is still the need for the physical component when you talk about like torque specs or other things I'm sure Chris could list out as well. But in terms of making it more cost effective, more efficient, and giving people a real sense of confidence of what they're doing before they get out there, it's so effective.
I'll briefly pile on to that, Jeff. I think you hit the nail on the head with the word confidence. I think that's one of the biggest factors. And I'll tell another anecdotal story here related to this. And so when we're working with the U.S. Air Force, we've gotten, Marty, that's come up time and again, especially from, I might say, the older generation, the instructors that have been on the flight line training, in this case, new crew chiefs for decades. And here comes this newfangled technology. And you want me to train my folks on how to change the wheel and tire on a C-130 and that headset? And so we have to kind of hold their hand a bit through it. But usually what I lead with is that this, and Jeff, you just said this, it's not a replacement for the hands-on activity. We don't have the Star Trek Next Generation holodeck quite yet. And haptic gloves, they're getting better and better, but the force feedback in terms of lifting something that is 50 pounds in the real world, we're not there yet. But that doesn't mean that this technology can't give you the ability to gain that confidence through a lot of reps and sets, repetitions and sets, being able to train anytime and anywhere. And what we saw at a place like Shepherd Air Force Base in Wichita Falls, the students there could go change the wheel and tire on a C-130 50 times or 20 times, depending on how many times they needed to try it. They gained the confidence. And then, and the study showed this because they did an ROI case study, when they went out to do their hands-on training with the actual instructor, 90+% of those students nailed it on the first try. And that had all sorts of side effects of benefits in terms of the efficiencies, shortening the training pipeline so they could push more students through, and so on.
And from a learning science perspective, we're able to isolate those skills so that we don't get what we call cognitive overload, I think if we throw people into a real world setting where, as Jeff said, there's several procedures, you do overload the person. And a lot of people shut down, or they lose sort of their confidence, like we talked about. In VR, we can isolate one skill at a time, let them get good at that before we move them to skill 2 or skill 3, therefore making them that much more ready to go to a more dangerous situation like real life.
That was incredibly valuable. And in talking about, speed of training, I remember when Vehicles for Change was starting to get into the, and you, Chris, you guys sent me out the training to change a tire on a C30, and Jeff Bund and I were sitting in my office, and literally within 45 minutes, I actually felt like I'd go out to 130 and at least go through the steps of taking off that tire. And I think that's a huge part when we're talking about these 750,000 jobs that are open right now, and how do we train people to go to those jobs? Now, Vehicles for Change spends a lot of time, particularly in the prisons and juvenile detention centers and in jails. And the other statistic that I looked up when I saw the 750,000 was this year in the United States, there will be 650,000 individuals released from prison jails across this country. So if we figure out a way to efficiently and economically train these individuals, wow, what a difference that would make for recidivism rates, for crime, for the economy across this country. So I just see VR being a huge to that. Now, we talked a lot about, and Vehicles for Change spends a lot of time, obviously, in the automotive field. What are the other fields they're currently using? We saw Beth with her video and HVAC, but I'm sure that folks in the audience are going, great, but I don't want to train auto technicians. We work with constructor electricians. Are there other programs out there that you guys know of that folks should be aware of?
I'll go first then. So the healthcare industry, and Beth brought this up, but for example, nursing and nurses, same idea here. There's so many things going on in a nurse's head when they approach the patient. Not only that, but we haven't even talked about the whole notion that if we learn under the guise or auspice that we're scared, that impedes our ability to learn. So if you put nurses on the floor in a real hospital where they have to look at a plethora of vital signs, and all of a sudden one triggers off, their heart as the nurse starts beating fast, they're way more apt to make mistakes. Well, we can train nurses in a virtual hospital where, again, we've talked about this, we can isolate so they're just maybe checking 1 or 2 vital signs and trying to assess and then apply some sort of treatment towards that. So nursing, hospitals, healthcare workers is a big field that's up and coming with VR.
Yeah, to your point, Craig, I've had individuals from carpentry and welding for that same reason, because they've been more confident in, putting staples into it. And the more physical labor intensive the job, I feel as though people are more apt to try it virtually, as opposed to things that are less labor intensive. So I think the more labor intensive, I don't want to take everybody's thunder, but carpentry and welding, specifically welding, is really picked up as far as VR, and that would make sense from a cost perspective and from a liability standpoint. Drop a tire in your foot, that's different than getting torched with a welding stick. So those are the two I've seen really rising recently.
But along those lines, are there any particular companies that you can mention that folks could look up? Any names that I know come across a few that are a little different, but could you give people a little idea what else is out there that they could actually go look for?
Back to my nursing example. So Ohio State University and their nursing department, for example, have used me as a consultant, but they have a very robust simulation training program for their entire, year 1, 2, 3, and 4, their entire nursing curriculum. And, they're expanding on that. That's another thing that we haven't really talked about is, you might start out with a simulation, but when we deploy learning, there's all sorts of different sort of ways that that's deployed. And one, of course, is sort of closer to the end of the line, and that's simulation. But if we back up the process of learning, when you're a novice, we're not saying that you shouldn't get some lecture. Well, you could do that lecture in a virtual environment. Beth talked about the social aspects of VR and the fact that people are living all over the world. And, you might have nurses in rural or remote areas who maybe can't come into the university. VR can allow them to meet up in a virtual space and learn through the lecture first, but then branch out into simulations and other modalities of learning.
Chris, is the thing that you've seen in your world that there are other programs out there that are used for VR training?
Yeah, I mean, building on some of what both Craig and Jeff were saying, I will say that not everything gets better by putting it in virtual reality. We have customers that come to us and they think that, well, if we just put this in the virtual world, it's going to be better, and that's not always the case. I do agree with both with Jeff talking about what I would call the hard skills or hands-on training. That's generally been what we've more focused on. Now there is something to be said for sure about and there's companies that focus on this around what I would call soft skills training, whether it's and some of that might even get into the nursing field, where learning how to work with a new patient, or maybe even role play, deliver difficult news to a parent or things like that. But our focus with hard skills and more hands-on training, I think that the criteria that we've looked at is, if it's something that is inherently dangerous to do in the real world, VR is probably a good candidate. If it is something that is inherently disruptive to do in the real world, same thing. If it's something that you're having trouble training enough people fast enough, we've talked about that. VR can be really a force multiplier for shortening the training cycle. And so the demand signal for us, we've built a VR training platform that is frankly unopinionated as to the type of training that you do on it, but the demand signal that we've gotten, definitely from the U.S. military, but outside as well, has been things that are task-based, which has gravitated towards aircraft maintenance, but more broadly getting into civil engineering, security forces training, definitely in the medical, not so much surgical for us, although there are companies out there that focus very much on surgical use cases, but more, think medevac or emergency management training, triage, and things of that nature. Definitely anything where you need to measure and really practice the decision making, so that you're not scared, like Craig said. But let's get all the fear out in the virtual world, make mistakes for free, where there's no ramifications. So then when you're in the real world, you nail it. So there's a target-rich environment, I think, of really valuable training use cases that we see.
Yeah, one really good example I have that backs all of this up is at my last job, we worked with a company called Touch of Life Technologies, which had a really vivid digital reconstruction of the human anatomy. And they have really good results training nurses, doctors, anatomists on the very detailed inner workings of the human body, and it fits sort of all of those things. It's a bottleneck in training. They have trouble training enough people fast enough. And typically this training is used with human bodies, which are obviously like a very finite controlled resource. And so making the most of the time when they can get into a cadaver lab is super valuable and important. And they have really good results, and the way that they're able to deliver that visual information in a way that's like rich and meaningful is really striking. So, yeah.
And Marty, one last thing too, is the state of Kentucky has put virtual reality in all their public schools. I think they're the first state of all that have entered it. So that's a definite work case of virtual reality being used in the education sector.
Jeff Crawford and Chris, so talk a little about, because I know a lot of our folks in the audience work inside the prisons. And one of the things that we ran into early on was you can't have the internet in the prison. Can you guys talk a little bit about how you overcame that obstacle and working together? So maybe there's some ways that our audience can figure that out, and maybe we can save them some time and energy.
Yeah, I can go first, and Jeff, you can pile on. That is a huge challenge, not just in the prison system, but actually in a lot of places. And something that we've found from our perspective, or our vantage point, is that getting virtual reality to work in a prison is in many ways has similar challenges to getting it to work on an Air Force base, or in a hangar, something that was built maybe close to a century ago, and lack of Wi-Fi, lack of adequate power, and things of that nature. And so when I talked earlier on about our approach to build an enterprise-ready VR training platform, it was in part meant to address some of these challenges. So the ability to train anytime, anywhere, you have to check a lot of boxes. And so the ability to, and just to dive right into this specific challenge here, the ability to take a headset and to go offline and to train in an offline setting, but then have the ability, once you're back on the network, to have captured, we call the store and forward. So you captured all of the information, you know who was in the headset, and then you can actually give them credit for that and send it back to the mothership, so to speak, once you have connectivity. That's something that you need to think about early on, and you need to take more of a platform approach when you're building out a VR training program. But there's a lot of challenges around this, and every situation we've gone into is usually a little bit different. There's similarities, of course. In some cases, we do have Wi-Fi access. In other cases, we don't. In some cases, we have very limited Wi-Fi access. In some cases, there's a lot of cybersecurity requirements. And so that's been a lot of what we've done, is kind of taking both the platform approach while also building out amazing, immersive, interactive training content, which you need both though. You need both that enterprise platform approach plus the content. Over to Jeff to add on, and correct me to 100% if I got any of that wrong from your.
Oh no, you got it perfectly right, and that's the one mode. And HTX did a fantastic job to pivot to give us that option with what we call course in the box, and that was instrumental in us being able to have successful pilots at MCIW, Women's Prison, and subsequently that second interview you saw at CNN. So that was a good mechanism. It's not the most ideal, like Chris said, because it's not the all experience at once, but being able to connect it to an internet at some point in time can do that. We've also learned another way to do it as well, in which you're able to do, I don't want to nerd it up, but basically you could put the impact in its kiosk mode. And basically that would be the only thing in the headset. And how it would work is we would be, and my teammate Jayesh is phenomenal at it. This is not me, but he would connect with the state of Maryland or whatever different account we're with, and work with their IT department. And we've done that with pilots and some of our customers now, where everything's out of the headset except just the application, HTX Labs, and everything that's associated and any websites connected also get to go through. And we have uncovered that has been also a viable solution as well. The most optimal solution, of course, is the full experience with internet connection. But those three options those two, the course in the box option or something similar to that with some manual adjustments, and then being able to do like a kiosk.
Thank you, Jeff. Jeff Bund or Craig, ever interact with this type of a situation where you couldn't have access to the internet? Did you guys do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is one of the main pain points, actually, and it's something that I think the hardware manufacturers have to do a little bit of a better job at enabling features that can happen offline. Like one thing we always have trouble with Meta is casting a headset so you can train someone on how to use it without being able to log into their account. But there are always ways of working around it, and we've made do thus far. But I think it's something where as this continues to take off, we'll see it get easier and easier. Like Meta, Apple, and the other companies are building the tools that can help us kind of that are more geared towards this type of use case instead of, you know, the person in their office with a small business internet connection at home or at their office. Yeah.
And the last point I want to make on this is, you know, consider the alternative, which is expensive workshops, which, you know, when we talk about accessibility, which we are right now, locks out way more people than, you know, the ability to kiosk a headset. You know, it's akin to sports. Like, how many athletes do you see that are marginalized, that are swimmers or tennis players or golfers? Not many, because they're locked out when it comes to accessibility to get on a tennis court or to get on a golf course or to get into a swimming pool. You know, they'll play football/soccer because these sports are way more accessible. Well, I see VR as helping with that when it comes to training in a lot of these workplace situations, because they can't right now get to maybe a physical automotive shop. Well, let's use VR to get them hooked and interested, and then move them towards the accessibility of getting into a workshop.
Hey, Craig, I'm going to stay with you on, as a matter of fact. But to your point, to launch an autumn training center, just the capital costs are close to $1 million. By the time you get a building, you outfit it with equipment, you find an instructor, tools, and then you need cars. So to your point, absolutely, the is that you just don't have a program at all. But talk a little bit about if someone wanted to actually put a virtual training program in their curriculum, what providing to their constituents. What do you need? What's it take? What's the cost? Do you have an idea what the cost would be for a general program? What you're putting in schools, as a matter of fact.
When we outfit a school, which I've done a few times, you know, normally we're looking at sort of a number, like how many, you know, what's your maximum number of students? You know, generally we start out with a space that has 22 headsets. Those headsets, give or take where you are around the world, are, you know, the MetaQuest 2 right now, I think they're $300 US. And then you're looking at software, and you know, Chris's group can create a bespoke experience. Sometimes if it's customized towards a certain learning outcome within your organization, you're looking at $10,000-ish to build that. But then, you know, the reach of that particular digital program and platform is immense, because you can put thousands of people through it within your organization. So those are a few numbers. I'll let the rest of the panel maybe fill in some of the blanks that I might be missing.
Yeah, I can jump in, and Marty, I think you asked about cost, but I think you were also more I think broadly asking, you know, what are the things you need to have in place or be thinking about, you know, if you're starting to dip your toe in the water, you want to get into this space. Funding dollars is certainly on the list, and you know, we of course get that question a lot from customers or potential customers, and yeah, I know a lot of folks hate this answer. I actually hate it too, but it depends. It depends on what they're looking to do. And you know, there is some kind, you know, there are certain types of training that is out there, VR already kind of off the shelf, that you can find for, you know, HVAC is a good example. There's different types of OSHA training is just another example that almost has maybe been commoditized, where it's easier to say, well, yeah, that's going to be this cost, and it's published. If you're looking for something that is more of a scope where we're going to build an immersive training environment for you, then that's where it depends. And our recommendation usually for folks is to crawl, walk, run, but not to start so small that you can't show enough of an ROI to decision makers to then unlock a broader program. And so there's definitely a strategy there that we try to advise customers that are just getting started on this, that you do need funding. You do need internal champions. You need folks that are going to fight for this. And really with that, there's this, I would say, a culture of innovation within the organization. And I would further say that, certainly from my perspective, this technology is not, it's beyond it's left the innovation space. I would say there's still plenty of innovation left to do, but it's certainly beyond good enough at this point. Where there's still a lot of innovation I see necessary within organizations, and really it's more change management, is how to really get this deployed at scale. And some of that goes back to unlocking funding and budget. But again, reason to start small, show a really good win, and then build from there. And with that, things that they need to think about early on is, and I mentioned this earlier, is pick the right use case. Pick the right kind of training to incorporate into virtual reality. Plan how you're going to integrate that into the existing learning ecosystem. I know there was a question earlier with after Beth's keynote about, can you just use VR? And you can, but in our experience, most of the time customers want to incorporate it into an existing curriculum, into an existing ecosystem. And so doing that correctly requires a lot of upfront thoughts. It doesn't have to be a lot, but planning is key there. And then back to the ROI, I can't stress this enough. We are still at a phase where, even though I think it's motherhood and apple pie in this group, that this is a better way to learn, this is the future of learning, so to speak. The folks that control the budget in a lot of organizations, they still need to be convinced. So thinking about how you're going to capture the data and the analytics, it can't be an afterthought. It has to be part of your plan so that you can go back and say, hey, look at this. We reduced the training time by this %. We showed that it's more effective by this % when compared to the normal training curriculum. And we've seen this both within the Department of Defense, but within commercial enterprises as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think the other piece of that is, particularly for the groups that we have with us, is how many people did you employ? I mean, that number one priority. Jeff Crawford, a little bit, you've put this program, VR training, in a couple of locations. What was required in order to put that in there, as far as equipment, time, investment, those types of things? If somebody says, well, I want to bring VR to my program in Minnesota, kind of what's the demand for time and equipment?
Sure, that's a good question. Once we have like a pre-evaluation where we kind of understand and ask certain questions to the number of students you're going to have, time frame you can commit to that. We have a very simple algorithm based upon the number of hours you can commit, the number of clients that you have, and what you're looking to achieve. You can do it in this amount of time. So we kind of come up with a schedule. And then after that, it's just simply a matter of identifying. We fill out an order form. So we would order the hardware. We would set up and facilitate a 2-day training where we do 2 4-hour sessions. Like Craig said, you don't want to overdo the training. And certainly when you're training the trainer, you don't want to do that. So you want to be able to set 2 days aside in which you basically train the trainer like they are the student or the client. We go over what, there was a point made earlier about pre and post evaluations. I think, Chris, that was you that made that. So we go over the pre and post evaluation, because there has to be outcomes and measurables attached to that. And that was always designed from the beginning as well. Other than that, getting the charging station, so you would be able to have an opportunity to have the Oculus or the equipment in an environment where it will be safe and it can be charged, because they need to be used every day. And then any other ancillary products that would make it user-friendly for the customer experience, whether it be added addition for any headset, or for folks who need for their goggles, or for any adjustments in the back. And that's been my experience so far. Gentlemen, let me know if there's anything I missed.
Jeff, you mentioned one thing that I want to go back to. You said train the trainer. Do you need an instructor? Do you have to have an auto instructor? Do you have to have, if you're welding, do you have to have somebody who's certified in welding to be there? Or is this stuff?
Absolutely not. And all the pilots and all the customers that have actually purchased licenses and had outcomes, no one has been a subject matter expert, and no one has had to hire an additional person for this. And we believe we also facilitate, and is included with that, is a 130-page manual, which gives you every outline, every lesson, how many minutes it should take, what the student would go over. And so it is very user-friendly. To give you an example, at MCIW Correctional Facility, was 2 of the officers that facilitated it because they were around the IPs the most, but they were highly engaged with them with no car experience. So no, Marty, you do not have to be. In fact, we've seen folks connect better with the folks with no experience going with someone who's not a mechanic. And that seems to have been a great synergy.
And that's something, folks, that I hear out in the field a lot is one of the problems is I can't find an instructor. Well, with VR, the way the system's designed and set up, that's what it's set up for. It is really to create a training environment where you don't need an instructor, that the entire system is held within the headset, within the software that's being created. We're coming up on time here a little bit. I did want to throw out a thing that we saw on the internet because in the chat, because I can relate to this question. How do you see people, and I think the question said people of age, which I think relates to those of us who may be over 65, adopting this kind of technology, and have you had any experience with that? Jeff Bund, I know you've done a lot and been in this field for a long time, so I'm going to throw that one at you first.
Yeah, I think I don't have any secret or easy answer, but I know for us, one of the things we did at Headwall, which is a company I run currently, is we try to give people as many affordances as possible that they're used to. And what I mean by that is that we have a lot of really good results using mixed reality. So like creating a little bit more comfort when people can see the world around them and their colleagues. We also recently enabled keyboard and mouse so that people can at least start that way with our application, which is a little different than training, but I think that that's been really good. I think the hardware improving and becoming like higher refresh rate and the tracking being better has made it more acceptable. And I think also just the widespread marketing effort that a lot of companies have invested in and making the technology sort of more socially accepted is really good. But then I think the thing that that I've found works for us a lot, it goes back to something that Chris was saying earlier, which is that people who are otherwise predisposed against using virtual reality can be convinced if they think it will help their organization. And if you can show them a clear demonstration of why this will help, that defeats most objections that I've seen. And even if we haven't been able necessarily to convince them that they should use the headsets all the time, they can see it in the people that are coming up under them that they'll be more comfortable and they're okay knowing that you know, this will ultimately get adopted maybe like after they leave or for people that are actually implementing the training under them. So I don't know, does that answer your question?
I think that's a huge help. And you know, talking about it was interesting, the video that Beth showed at the end. One of the comments that the gentleman made in the video was that he had people who were younger and who were older who adopted the system very quickly and really enjoyed using it. So Jeff Crawford or Craig, how about you guys? Craig, I think you work a little bit more with young people, but do you do anything with old people like me?
Yeah, I train a lot of teachers, and we're getting pretty old, us teachers. But I think there's nothing that Jeff hasn't said that wasn't incredibly pertinent. But I will add this: I think we make a huge assumption that just because a student, a younger person, is what we call in technology or ed tech a digital native, doesn't automatically guarantee that they know what they're doing in VR. And I think we need to assume that everyone is starting from the same place. And like Jeff said, like we need to make sure that, you know, do they know how to operate the controllers? Just because a student's a gamer, plays on their cell phone a lot, doesn't mean that they know how to operate the controllers. Same idea, like they may have slight, you know, they may not, that might be the first time they're in VR, and we always have to assume that and treat everyone the same. Digital native doesn't mean virtual reality expert.
Yeah, I will piggyback that. I think we have seen old dogs learn new tricks. I know in the last cohort we had at MCIW, we had 4 different generations. We had a young lady that was 60 use it, and she was very fluid with it. I think what I'm noticing, this is anecdotally, but what I'm noticing is once they get over the technology gap or the hand-eye coordination gap, their experience gap is way more than a high school or student like that. So their aptitude and those experiences tend to come out. So I'm noticing that once they get over that, whereas what I'm also noticing is folks, high school CTE students may understand the technology quicker, but they probably struggle or take a little bit longer to mature in the learning and the development through the technology. So it's just a matter of getting the confidence and overcoming. That's what I've seen so far.
Excellent.
Marty, if I could
Chris,
just add on,
anything?
I'll be brief, so I know we're kind of up against it, but agree with everything the other 3 folks just said here. I will say that probably I would say on a weekly basis, if not daily sometimes, we will hear objections rather from the so-called older generation, which I'm basically in that myself and more so every day, that not always, but sometimes we'll hear things like that. That's not going to work, or often that made me sick when I tried VR. And what I've found is that a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, if you peel back the onion a bit and you ask questions, well, what was that experience that you had? And I'll laugh kind of internally a lot of times, because they'll say, well, I was at a Best Buy and they put me in this roller coaster thing, or my son has a PlayStation VR, and it's like, all right. And then you have to be very respectful about how you kind of walk them through this. But I found that if you can reintroduce, again, the so-called older generation to virtual reality and do it in a responsible way, onboarding is key. We used to call folks that we have here VR Sherpas back sort of in the day, like Sherpaing them through the experience, but it's holding their hand a bit and giving them that good experience. And like Jeff said, couldn't agree more. A lot of times that you don't have to convince them to want to play Beat Saber and be in a headset every single day, if you can show them the value from how their students are learning. So just my 2.5 cents to pile on, but couldn't agree more with what Jeff and Craig and other Jeff said. A lot of Jeffs.
So again, we got a couple minutes left. We did have another question in the chat that I wanted to address. Hear this from my friends in the nonprofit all the time. Who's funding something like this, right? Where do we go? Foundations. How do we find money if we want to do training? If you want to develop your own system, certainly really reach out to at HTX Labs. They're amazing, but it is a capital cost. So I know there's often foundations that are actually looking for organizations that need capital funding. So there's often capital funding that's available. So if you're looking to develop your own system, certainly capital funding would be the way to go. That's how we were able to fund our program. But from a training standpoint, there's dollars, there's SNAP ENT dollars. You can use any training dollars. And certainly, I think what we have found as we've been working in this field for the last year and a half is that foundations are excited that we're looking at new technologies and figuring out new ways that we can provide high quality training that's going to lead to employment. And so I think that for those of you who are development officers or CEOs of the nonprofits, if you're looking to fund something like this, I would approach your foundation and your partners, particularly your state government as well, because they get excited when they know that you're using technology and you're going to cut that cost significantly compared to what it's going to take to run a hands program. I mean, you can a virtual reality program in your training for less than it would cost to go hire an instructor for a year. So a huge deal, and hopefully you can find some funding. Now, I want to make sure I let folks know that we are recording this event. We make that recording available along with information of our speakers in case you want to get in touch with them. There are a few that have asked maybe not to share their information, but we'll share that information for you. So that if you have additional questions or you're interested in, the program that Craig is running in Canada or the VR program that Vehicles for Change has available, developing your own, you can reach out to our speakers. I want to turn it back to you to give you maybe a minute just to kind of close the year on how we're going to use virtual reality, what you see being done in the future, and anything that you would like to leave our audience with just tidbits of information that they can use to this into practice.
I'll start and just quickly wrap up. I think learning has undeniably an engagement problem, and VR is our way around that. Too much learning is sit passively, listen, maybe take notes, but not much active. And VR is a game changer to force organizations to start to allow their learners some enjoyment and some engagement. And my last piece of the puzzle is, like, shameless plug here, like my consulting company, this doesn't happen on its own. You need help through people like you see on the panel who kind of can help you get going. Thank you.
I'll turn it to you.
To who in particular? Or I can just jump in, Marty.
Go ahead, Chris.
Sorry, you cut out. I wasn't sure who you said. But no, I can wrap up briefly, and some just also probably pile onto some of what Craig said. I would say for everyone listening, here we are in June of 2024. This is a pretty good time to dip your toe in the water. For those of us that have been at this for quite a while now, there was not too long ago, it felt more like the Wild West when it came to immersive technology, and it's come a long way in just the last 5-6 years. And that's on both the software side and the hardware side. All of this is becoming increasingly, I wouldn't say we're at normalization yet, but it's increasingly easier to use, far so more than it's ever been before. Companies like Meta are certainly helping with that tremendously, with the affordability of the hardware, and the portability and the ease of use. And that's just getting better and better with time. And this isn't going away. There's been times in the past where VR, maybe those of you, or AR, those of you that remember Pokemon Go back in the early 2000s, it was more of a fad. The technology is far better than good enough at this point. It's not going away. It is the future of learning. I believe it's the future of work. I think everybody here does on this panel. And so I guess my message there is that if you've been hesitating, if you've been worried that that's too complicated, I'm not ready to do that yet. It's far more approachable than it ever has been before, and there are folks like you see here on the panel who can help you with that journey. So I really appreciate the time and the attention today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Jeff Bund. I'll throw it back to you and let Jeff Crawford bring us home.
Yeah, I feel like Chris kind of took my message, but what we say a lot here at Headwall is this is just the beginning. And I felt like Beth actually and her video expressed it really well. Like, we feel like we're kind of mimicking some of the adoption of computers, and we're at the point now where people are getting them into their homes and they're able to use them and get value. So for sure, there is a lot of opportunity now today, but we feel like it's just the beginning of this, that we're seeing the capital equivalent of several space programs being invested in making the hardware better, faster, lighter. And like Chris, my first headset was the Oculus DK1 about 9 years ago. And if I look at what's possible now with the tech versus even 3 years ago, and it's not just the weight and the resolution, but the ability to support different hardwares, the ability to install it, to use it, just the ease of adoption has gotten so much better. And I think in the next 5 years, we'll see that double the progress that we've seen in the past 5 years. So yeah, that's my message. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time. Like, information is the #1 commodity in the world. And how you get information and how you receive information is going to be paramount to your success in anything you do. And you know, virtual reality of all the technologies, I think, is really, because of its immersiveness, is going to really lead this charge. And I think a lot of organizations, you look at the top 6 organizations on the stock exchange, all over $1 trillion: Microsoft, Apple, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and NVIDIA. What do they all have in common? They're all in this space. And so, needless to say, you know, people put their money where their mouth is. So for any naysayers out there, this isn't the future, this is the present. And so what I will tell everybody out there, that if a nonprofit who was a sure bet at training auto mechanics and who also is a sure bet at getting them job placed can use technology and partner with someone like HTX Labs and create something like this in a relatively short period of time, anybody can do it. And so I just think you have to have the confidence and more importantly, the wherewithal and the understanding of what it's for. But if we can do it, we believe anybody else can do it. And so that's my simple message.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you all. Our panelists, as I mentioned, got started. We had a panel of just amazing speakers who have tremendous knowledge in this. And I talked about those 750,000 jobs. You know, there's a lot out there that are trying to do some amazing things, and I know there are a bunch of them in the audience. And we have to find a way. That's why we're here. And I know that that's why you're here. And I think that using technology and using specifically virtual reality, and we'll find out a little bit more about how AI is being used in this field, because we have another great panel coming up and a keynote speaker. But we have to figure out how to use technology, because we can't sustain the programs that we're doing in a brick and mortar. I know at Vehicles for Change, when we talked about our expansion and taking this program national, and we looked at 20 locations and figured that's going to be $20 million year over year that we have to raise in order to keep this program going. And it's a limited number of people that we're able to make. And now that we've implemented the virtual reality training, and we're looking at our own expansion and putting virtual reality training in more than 150 locations in the next 2 years, it's only because we're using the technology, and we know that this technology is as valuable as that hands-on, because we've heard it from National Automobile Dealers Association, and we've heard from dealerships, we've heard it from garage owners, and we've heard it from folks at Napa Auto Parts. So we know the technology works. We hope that you get the opportunity to take a look at it. Again, we're going to send out the recording. We're going to send out information of our speakers himself. If you have any questions, please reach out. We want to see this technology being used as much as possible so that we can make a difference in the lives of those families that we all serve. So we're going to go into a 10-minute intermission, and then we will be back with our keynote speaker, AI, and Todd Marks and Steve Tormino, who's going to lead that conversation. So stay with us, and thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Innovating the Future of Virtual Symposium hosted by Vehicle Change. As we celebrate our 25th anniversary, we're excited to see how AI is transforming workplace development. So with that in mind, to my left, I've got 2 monitors. Now, I will be managing and hosting thought leaders, innovators, keynote speakers, as well as you. I've got live feeds here of every question that comes through, every comment that you'll see. So if you see me looking to my left, looking at these monitors, don't be alarmed. I'm just making sure we're not missing anything specific. So while many of us think of AI as a relatively new to technology, history tells us a little bit different. In fact, the first AI deployed on a worldwide basis was done so near a decade ago. It was an AI deemed rank brain. It was developed and launched by Google to govern and manage the Google search algorithm. Now, with that being said, it was deployed around the world. Shortly after, OpenAI was founded in I believe, December of 2015. Is the innovator and the developer of ChatGPT. ChatGPT then brought forth the ability of AI in our marketplace. So I would actually equate that to something like I don't know, Kim Kardashian. She definitely brought forth the mass visibility of home video. Now, with that being said, we've got, like I said, a great panel today. In addition to that, we also have some keynote speakers. So let me introduce them to you. Our panel and keynote speakers include Todd Marks. He's the founder and CEO of Micro Technologies. We also have Lucas Litton, the Chief Commercial Officer for Fit AI, Bianca Jackson, a VR entrepreneur, and Laurie Busman, Chief of Staff for Virgin. So before we dive into our panel and discussion, I'd like to introduce Todd. I've known Todd for the better part of 20 years. In fact, when I first met him, he had this small company with a handful of employees that were building and developing apps and games. Forward 20 years later, and he's become an innovator and a leader in many, many different industries. He's worked with organizations such as Salon, Wendy, NASA, to name a few. On that topic, he is seen globally and nationally as a leader in many, many different areas. So Todd, are you there?
Hey, Steve, I'm here.
Fantastic. So how's everything been? I hear you have a speaker for it.
I do. There's a little bit of an echo for you, Steve, but I do have. Can you repeat that question?
No, absolutely. So I hear you have a keen for us to hear.
Oh, yeah, you gotcha. I'm all queued up and ready to roll.
Tell us, what do you got? Let's go.
All right. Well, if you don't mind, if you could mute, because we're getting a pretty bad echo, I'll jump in. All right. I am here to talk about AI and a comprehensive look at education and workforce development. I've got a few videos throughout this presentation. The first video that I'm going to share with you was the first movie created with AI. And watch this movie. It's just a little short film, but everything and anything that's wrong with AI is really visually depicted in this movie. So it's a lot of fun here. It's called Duck Story.
I'll see you tonight.
Be careful.
Why?
It's ducks mating season.
Don't be silly, I'll be fine.
What do you have there?
Oh, just some beer.
Please don't drink and drive.
Who do you think I am?
And as you're watching this, look at the hands, look at the number of ears.
It's such a long
AI
road.
definitely
There's nothing
is
to do.
making a lot of problems. Look at that. 3 hands.
Please don't drink and drive.
2
Who
heads.
does she think I am? I can have a beer if I want to. Nothing bad's gonna happen to me. 1 beer.
3
Who's gonna know?
hands. 6 fingers.
Oh, front touch! Shit!
You are now under us.
Rock like wait!
I'll see you tonight.
All right, that is called Duck Story. And it's really just a good example of like AI. It's still generally in its infancy. Now, it's been out for over 70 years, believe it or not. I'm going to start with talking about the history of AI. I'm going to talk about, ethics in AI, how to use, AI without exposing your IP. And then I'm going to go through several case studies in education and workforce development, which is what we're really here talking about today. But I wanted to share that video with you because there's certain things AI does extremely well, and then there's some things it's still challenged with. For some reason in video, it's challenged with hands and heads and eyes. It's really challenged visually with creating text, but yet when you go to ChatGPT or you go to Microsoft Copilot or Google or any of the different LLMs that they have right now, it does a great job with conversational text in a bot form. It just struggles with that visually. But let's get into this. All right, so MindGrub itself, we make and market client software for clients. We really exploded on the scene around mobile apps. We went 10 years on the Inc. 5000. And that market is really kind of saturated and somewhat flat now, but I'm excited about AI. It's the next really big growth market. We started with AI years and years ago in some of the underlying technologies. But as Steve mentioned, ChatGPT is the Kardashian of AI, as they were to home movies. I thought that was a great analogy. I got the joke there, Steve. Really, AI went from early adopters crossing the chasm into now the early majority of users. It's still a minority of users. It's still about 30% of people, 33% that have used AI. but it is going to be prolific in everything we do. So when I look at AI itself, we really start with businesses looking at a sprint zero. How can they use AI? And every business can generally use AI these days. Then we look at what are the models we want to use with them. And then we start to integrate AI for them. And then we look at the results for that ROI. We've done this for a number of companies over the years, but enough about the background. Let's get into AI itself. So first off, as Steve mentioned, ChatGPT really came out in 23 in November. And that's when that was ChatGPT 3.0. That's when we finally crossed that chasm, got in the early majority of users in the marketplace. But it started in the 1950s at Dartmouth. And they really started working with some of those underlying technologies. There's two types of artificial intelligence. There's general intelligence and there's narrow intelligence. And I'm going to really speak to both general and narrow. So on the narrow intelligence side, you really have like autocomplete. So if you start typing in a name and you're searching for somebody in a field and you start typing a J-O, it might come up with John Doe. You start typing a J-A, maybe it comes up with Jane Doe. Over here on the right side, recommendation engines are also a narrow type of AI. And you've been using these things for years. And so with Amazon, for instance, if you put a book in your cart, and then based on that book and all the information, it goes against this entire large database, and it says, other users that have read this book have also read these books, or they've bought these products. That's also narrow AI, right? It does one thing really well. Then there's the general AI, which you're starting to see really explode on the scene now, and that is the ChatGPT, which you've heard of. If you're a Microsoft user, you've heard of Microsoft Copilot. Apple just released 2 days ago their intelligence AI, which is now going to be found in all of their products. And also you have Meta, which we heard from earlier, has released their own AI products, as well as NVIDIA is really a market leader in AI. So just to reiterate here, ChatGPT, DALL-E, those are general AI. They can do a lot of things broadly, and they also have some narrow capabilities. So again, there's the general and the narrow AI. Just a quick example of what DALL-E does, and I really love their visual depiction here of a neural network. So I'm going to play this video next for you.
Have you ever seen a polar bear playing bass? Or a robot painted like a Picasso? Didn't think so. DALL-E 2 is a new AI system from OpenAI that can take simple text descriptions like a koala dunking a basketball and turn them into photorealistic images that have never existed before. DALL-E 2 can also realistically edit and retouch photos. Based on a simple natural language description, it can fill in or replace part of an image with AI-generated imagery that blends seamlessly with the original. It's called inpainting. In January 2021, OpenAI introduced DALL-E, a system that could generate images from text, like this avocado armchair. DALL-E 2 takes the technology even further with higher resolution, greater comprehension, and new capabilities, like inpainting. It can even start with an image as an input and create variations with different angles and styles. DALL-E was created by training a neural network on images and their text descriptions. Through deep learning, it not only understands individual objects, like koala bears and motorcycles, but learns from relationships between objects. And when you ask DALL-E for an image of a koala bear riding a motorcycle, it knows how to create that or anything else with a relationship to another object or...
All right, great. I just wanted to share that quickly with you to really talk about broadly what is a neural network, how is it combining koala bears and motorcycles. Let me give you another example that you're probably that much more used to. Google Maps, right? So a case study of Google Maps here in that you have a starting place and an ending place that you're trying to get to. I go to Tyson's Corner all the time in Northern Virginia. It's a hot mess right now because there's a lot of construction on the Beltway. But what Google does is it has years and years of data, and it knows like what are all the possible routes to go from A to B of that data. Then it has all the real-time data of every single car on the road that has Google Maps on their device and they're traveling down the road. You're sharing that data with Google constantly. So if I say I want to go to Tyson's from my home in historic Ellicott City, it can take its historical data and say, here are all the potential routes. It can take the current data, and then it can plot the best route for me to go with variations. You can see, there's this route here, and there's an alternative route here that actually cuts through DC. both of which are coming up in about the same amount of time there. You can see hour 47, hour 47, right? And that is pretty narrow intelligence, but what it's doing is it's taking 2 points and it's filling in the details based on volumes of data. That's essentially what AI does for you. I also like to talk about AI in the concept of kind of how it works narrowly and how eventually it'll work generally. And this is what we call the Al Bundy and Gary Kasparov paradox. And this came from somebody who works at Aberdeen Proving Grounds. They mentioned it to us when we were kind of talking about general and narrow AI, and they said, typically, we think that Gary Kasparov, he was the famous Russian chess player that played against IBM Watson. And we thought that he was this brilliant, brilliant person. He is brilliant, brilliant human. But then IBM Watson was able to beat him 2 times, despite being the smartest human in the world. We said, oh my gosh, that's it. AI is going to take over the world. But the thing is, that's really narrow intelligence. If you have all the moves possible on a game board in a big database, and then at any given scenario on that board, you can plot the highest probability of your opponent's next move and your highest probability next move to win. A computer can do that narrowly really well. Now, for us Xers that remember Married with Children, Al Bundy, everybody looked at as being a really ignorant human, right? He liked to, just sit on the couch with his hands in his pants and, watch TV. But he actually does something brilliantly. He can decipher the TV from the background. He can pull out a single voice in the air. If his wife's screaming at him, he can pull her voice out of the air versus all the kids in the background yelling, right? AI still struggles with that. It has a real hard time with how many fingers we should have, right? Because we think we should have 5, but some people have no fingers, some people have 7 fingers. So AI is like, well, it could be any number of fingers between 0 and 7, right? So AI can't necessarily generalize as well as it can do things narrowly. And that's why in that first movie produced with AI, you started to see, 7 fingers and 3 arms and stuff, because sometimes people do have 7 fingers, right? Sometimes they don't have any. So how does it do that? It has tons and tons of data, and it tries to decipher the differences to make conclusions. And so as a kid growing up, we used to be asked to draw cats and dogs. And as humans, we are pretty wise to know that cats generally have whiskers and dogs generally have floppy ears, right? So we would draw dogs with big floppy ears, we draw cats with whiskers. But wouldn't you know it that some dogs, if you're a Doberman and you train the ears to stand on end, have pointy ears. And so that confuses AI. They say, well, generally it's going to have floppy ears, but sometimes, like in the middle picture there's a dog with a straight ear. And so an AI would have trouble telling the difference between a cat or a dog, because it's like, well, this dog in the middle has a straight ear, and I can't quite tell if it has whiskers or not because you can see some of its hair coming off its nose. I think it's a cat. But we can look at it and we say, that's not a cat, it's a dog, right? Because we are that much more intelligent generally than AI, which is still very narrow. AI also has trouble with dogs and bagels. We as humans can tell the difference, but AI still struggles. It struggles with dogs and muffins, blueberry muffins. And a lot of people like this last example here. It also struggles with dogs and fried chicken. Of course, as humans, generally, we can tell the difference between dogs and fried chickens, but AI still struggles with these things. But it's really coming a long way. Let's talk about some of the underlying technology. So AI is generally a term used for these 4 kind of underlying technologies, for the really 5 plus. Machine learning is one of those underlying technologies. That's where you feed it a lot of data, you train it what the right answers are, and it learns from that interaction. Part of that is that there's what's called large language models. And those large language models is really the algorithms and the analytics behind what it should do with a set of data to then make good decisions. But those decisions, those algorithms are actually nested in what's called neural networks. And that was that Dolly video I showed you visually. You could see how it's a series of decision makings that goes infinitely deeper. And every time you train it, it learns strong paths and weak paths. So if you train it, nope, that's a dog, not a muffin, then it reinforces itself. Okay, in these situations, it's a dog. In these situations, it's a muffin. and you can train it to then make better decisions. And that training process and it learning through these neural networks is what's called deep learning. So those are some of the underlying technologies. There's also natural language processing. So when you interact with a chatbot and you're typing in English, you'll notice if you go to like a ChatGPT or a Claude or Copilot or any of these, you can use any languages. You can use slang if you want to. You can use, Old English, right? There's a lot of things that you can write, and it has been trained to understand Old English or slang or foreign languages like French and Spanish. It's been trained to do that, and it uses what's called natural language processing. So it's understanding that, it's using its large language model to decipher what that means, and then it's using its neural networks to decide how to respond to you in the case of a chatbot. In the case of images, it's determining what are the extra pixels that are needed, the same way it responds to you on chat. It's figuring out, well, here's some missing pixels. I'm going to determine how to fill that in. Also, not just filling in with the pixels, there's also technology called computer vision, which is doing object recognition. And so it knows the differences between cars and traffic lights and humans. And this is really what's powering self-driving cars, which have a tremendous amount of AI in them. And I want to show you just a quick video of Waymo here. There's really two cities right now, San Francisco and Phoenix, Arizona, that are pioneering self-driving cars. This is our CTO getting picked up in a Waymo car. You'll notice there is no driver in this car whatsoever. They actually recommend you hop in the front seat, but he's a risk taker, so he hopped in the back seat here. And just like an Uber or a Lyft, he had a destination. He gets in the Waymo car, and it self-drives to that destination. Now, the reason they picked San Francisco is because a lot of that technology is being developed there. But Phoenix in particular has, pretty dry weather. It's got pretty flat roads. It's a little bit more of a grid pattern, so it's an easier city for self-driving cars. But this technology is going to become prolific and really be around the world. But there's a couple companies doing this now, but it uses that computer vision I talked about, and it uses a tremendous amount of AI to make decisions like, hey, I recognize that's a traffic light and it's red, so therefore I'm going to stop. All right, last but not least, we have business intelligence and data science. This is a huge part of AI. As I mentioned, it's very large databases to train these large language models, and then the data science to basically understand, is it right or not, and to be able to train AI. So that's a little bit about the history. Let's talk about generative content a little bit, because this was where ChatGPT came about. It generated textual content. The OpenAI visual is DALL-E. DALL-E now is free with Microsoft Copilot. You can get the newest version of DALL-E if in the paid-for account with ChatGPT. But as I mentioned, AI basically trains itself to fill in pixels. So, if you look at this face of the woman and there's missing pixels in the middle, it can look at a huge database and figure out what might her face look like. Again, it struggles with hands and it struggles with heads sometimes, because as we know, people have multiple numbers of fingers and multiple numbers of heads. But typically we only have we have two eyes, so and one nose and one mouth. You don't see a lot of variations of that in humans. So a face is pretty easy. When it gets into a waterfall, that's super easy, right? We know the water goes down, it comes over the waterfall, so it fills in those mixing pixels. And these are a number of generative AI tools. I talked about Copilot on the copy side, as well as ChatGPT, as you know. On the design side, there's DALL-E, there's Canva. We're using a great new tool at MindGrub called Gamma.app. And you can use ChatGPT to generate content, and we'll give it some prompts. We'll say, give me 10 or 12 slides worth of content. Then we'll take it in Gamma.app. We'll upload it using our out-of-the-box templates, and we can produce PowerPoint presentations within minutes now, instead of what used to take hours or days. All right, so let's look at one more thing here that's super cool. There's a technology called Synthesia. It's taken AI and generative images to the next level. It'll now do generative video, and I'm going to talk about a case study that happened recently once we watch this video.
Today, you're going to meet two versions of me. This version, live to camera, and this version made entirely from artificial intelligence. This is wild.
All right, so that's Synthesia. It allows you to upload images of yourself. You have to upload so many different images, and you get it some voice samples, and then they will create a fully virtual video avatar of yourself. And it's so close that now, from a security perspective, you know, they're talking about companies to have basically passwords that change every week, and you have to know the password, because there was a foreign company that created a bunch of videos of different companies' C-suites, and then they would set up a Zoom meeting with the comptroller of those companies, and they'd say, hey, you know, we have an emergency. We need you to transfer $50 million into this bank account. And the comptroller's in a Zoom meeting, and it's their CTO, their CEO, their COO saying, we got to transfer $50 million. And you know what happened? A comptroller transferred $50 million. So, you know, this is what is now the deep fakes. And so you're starting to see this, particularly in the political arena, you know, with Trump and Biden facing off here. You're going to start to see more deep fakes of them saying outrageous things. You have to really train your eye. You have to be the Al Bundy of the world to really understand, is this really them or is it AI? And I suggest you look at the mouth, because what they're doing on here is they're recreating mouth movements to map to that audio, and the mouth movements are a little unnatural. So that's really where you have to look to try to, you know, figure out, is this a bot or is this a human? Because deep fakes are going to fool us a lot, particularly when it comes to Zoom meetings or social media where the video quality is a little grainy anyway. All right, so moving on. AI itself on the software world, you know, if you want to get a fast tracker around here, a speed pass, it used to be a lot of form entry on the left side of the screen here. And luckily now with Google Chrome, it can autofill in a lot of those. But that type of software with big forms are going to go away, because now with that chat-based interface, I can just simply say, create me a fast track account. It already has my contact information. The browser is already storing credit card information if you allow it to. And so now automatically it can create that fast track account, and it'll say, hey, done, right? Or I'll be like, hey, Siri, create me a fast track account. Siri will be like, done. And this is where things are now going to progress with AI. I used to give this vision of, you know, having to go to the airport. I'd have to buy my own ticket. I'd have to drive myself there. I'd have to find my own gate. I'd have to wait in a long line to order Starbucks. But now I have my schedule. My self-driving car can sit outside and honk the horn to make sure I'm awake. I hop in the car. It drives to the airport. I used to say it interfaced with the parking garage, and then somebody at a conference reminded me that why wouldn't it just drop you off and then go make some money doing Uber by itself? I'm like, yeah, that's genius. Of course that's what's going to happen. So drops me off the airport, but then my phone says, hey, Todd, let me guide you to your gate. And it knows my walking pace using my accelerometer. It knows if my plane's on time or not. And nicely enough, my AI, which we call Guide on the Side now, already pre-ordered my Starbucks. And as I'm walking at my pace, the Starbucks barista who, you know, interfaced with my AI is like, hey, Todd, I got your, you know, your cappuccino for you, right? And I walk up and I take it. No more lines, no more driving my own car, no more having to order my own plane tickets, right? This is this type of stuff AI is going to do. A lot of very narrow stuff in just about every industry. So let's talk about education. Let's talk about workforce development. So, and I'm going to just talk broadly, and then I'm going to go give you some case studies of things we worked on. So education, and I love to show this image. It's a troubling image, but it shows the education system about 100 years ago, which was students in rows with bells going from class to class. And then I like to show the image from today, which is students in rows with bells going from class to class. The education model is actually based on the Industrial Revolution, and we generally haven't changed it that much. But now with AI, it's going to be the first time that we really revolutionize education, and you're going to start to see adaptive and personalized learning, so that AI is going to know how well you're doing, and it's going to then dish up automatically your next learning content, whether it's remediation if you're challenged with something, or if it's acceleration where you're doing well. AI is going to start to become your teachers, and it's going to be self-study, but it's going to guide you. And then there's also virtual tutors, virtual chatbots, and then applications, whether it's language learning apps or not. It's going to do automatic grading. It's going to have virtual labs. So the next school systems aren't going to be based on 170-year-old industrial revolution model. They're going to be based on today's knowledge economy, really leveraging AI. And I just can't wait for somebody like a Zuckerberg or a Musk to throw down and create the first AI-powered school system to bring us into this century. I'm going to do that myself in probably about 10, 15 years once I have the capital and the capacity to do so. But education is finally going to get a massive overhaul. Now, that being the case, we at MindGrub in particular, we really stress displace, not replace. So all of those teachers that just understand pedagogy and really understand the learning process, they're going to be the ones that train the AI to do the more 101 classes, right? The basic classes that you can learn with self-study, to free them up to do call it the gifted and talented classes, right? And so even though we have a teacher shortage, we can have AI do the remedial, the 101 stuff to displace our teachers and really use them for the highest and best use case of their time. Also, from a workforce development perspective, we're already seeing AI being used in recruiting and talent acquisition, employee self-service, such as benefits administration. Think call centers, right? Tons of humans sitting around and answering phones all day, answering questions. We're actively working at replacing or displacing and reducing the call center volume. We go to companies with large call centers and we say, give us your pie piece of all the things you do. We will replace that biggest pie piece with AI. And we'll even do it for a cut of your savings, not a cost to the bottom line, but actually a savings to the bottom line doing AI. Then their call center team can do the harder to answer questions and not the easier stuff that people can be doing self-service. Performance management, employee engagement, and workforce planning. These are some of the top ways that AI is going to really help out workforce development. Now I got some examples for you in certain industries. So we've been talking about VR today. We have an example of VR ourselves, which is learning from the students and has gamified for nurses how to use a crash cart here. Let me play this video. Oop.
This is the holodeck. On Star Trek, it's used for many things, including holograms. Here in Baltimore, MindGrub Technologies is using it for something similar.
The holodeck was kind of an obvious choice. With virtual and augmented reality, it's almost like when they exploded on the scene, they were a little ahead of their time. Now it's like the times have caught up with the technology.
The tech agency is using it as a controlled environment to test virtual reality apps and games, including this one in partnership with Mercy Medical.
Where you can go in as a clinician and actually go through code stimulation and virtual reality and really have a chance to perfect your skills without being in that urgent patient situation.
In this case, find the dopamine and give it to the patient before time runs out. So off you go, looking through the drawers until you find what you need.
And this, they get an opportunity where they're not really affecting a real patient's life, but yet it feels very real.
So that very similar to what Vehicles for Change is doing in their garages to teach some entry level, and the example you saw earlier was, for instance, an oil change. Similarly, the nurses can learn how to find everything in the crash cart, but not just VR. If you take the intersection of AI, now AI can see how have they done, and then if they're doing very well, it can give them harder and harder problems. If they're struggling with something, it can give them remedial problems. So now you're starting to see this intersection of AR plus AI, and that's that new educational learning environment that is going to inevitably take off. And I love, Meta's description earlier that they're trying to get heads in headsets. It is just a matter of going from this really early adopter stage on learning to the early majority of users. And we're right on that kind of precipice. We're right about to cross the chasm there. And it's going to also take some regulatory change to change, some of the education system and how money is directed, because this technology is going to be the future of education. So really excited to see AI and AR, VR on this collision course. Some other projects in the learning space, we work with Maryland Business Roundtable for Education, another for not-for-profit. And what they do is they take leaders in industry, subject matter experts, and they plot out their entire career path to how they got to their job. And then they create content for students to follow that career path. And as they engage in that content based on how well they're doing, or if they need remediation, then the algorithms behind that will dish up content for them to try to get them toward success in that career path. We also did this with a local company called Curiosityville. We did a lot of dynamic scaffolding for them. So they were teaching kids through gamified learning, how to do history, math, science, and English. And based on how well they did or where they needed remediation, they dynamically dished up content for them called scaffolding. And this is really where that self-paced learning in the future is going to get powerful, is having these algorithmic or AI engines behind them that dynamically gives you that next bit of content based on how well you're doing. So super powerful stuff that I'm excited for. But this travels a lot of different industries. So if you think of nursing right now, it's the #1 job opening in most states is skilled nursing. And if you think about the process now, it's identifying that there's a need for a nurse, writing the position description, putting that requisition order together, sending it to recruiters who then federate that on search. They get back a number of resumes. They screen those resumes. They make a narrow list. They give it back to the hiring manager. The hiring manager further screen that, and they set up appointments. All of that can be automated these days. So you can have default position descriptions that you use a ChatGPT to write, and you go to your admin portal, you'll say, I need nurses. That's it. You hit the button. I need nurses. From there, the AI is already integrated with all your recruiting partners. It sends it out to recruiting partners bring in the resumes. They don't even need to screen them anymore. The AI can screen the resumes. There's some improvement to be had there, but it can generally screen the resumes, particularly if you have key things like availability. They must be able to work Wednesdays, right? And so as the recruiters are sending out and getting information on resumes, they say, what days can you work, right? And if it's something is kind of black or white is, I can work Wednesdays, and that's easy for AI to do. If it's, well, I can work Wednesdays, but only between the hours of 2 and 4 and after 7, right? Like AI struggles with that, but it might just not eliminate them. It might still say, well, this one's gray. Let me bring it over the finish line, right? But then it can bring it in. You can do the final screening, and then ultimately it can auto schedule your one-on-one sessions to further interview them. Employee sentiment analysis. We used to send out like a tiny pulse every day to see how employees are doing. Now companies can just pull from all of their systems using AI. It can do analytics to know, how are you doing that day? If you're talking about nursing and they're in the emergency room and they lost a lot of patients and they're on chatter right now saying we lost a lot of patients, we're really distressed. Now the AI can step in and say, wow, in this ward in the emergency room, you have some morale issues because they lost a lot of patients today. And then AI can even address that. So we're starting to create bots that can do not just sentiment analysis, but they can do training and recognition, and even counseling. So if you're in a ward where you just lost a patient, based on the data in the system, the AI can recognize that, and then it can send you a push notification and say, hey, Todd, how are you doing? I noticed you lost a patient today. How are you feeling about that? And you can say, well, in this case, Ted, I'm feeling pretty, glum today because it's the second patient we lost. What do you think I can do about that? And then maybe the AI can suggest, turning to the Calm app and getting a few minutes of deep breathing to try to, steady your mental state, right? All of this can be done with AI now. It's just a matter of mapping out what are those journeys and how to automate them. All right, so just a couple things. We have 2 minutes here to finish up. So some last but not least things. You can absolutely use AI without exposing your IP. It is a bit of a danger if you start taking, important IP or records from your company, you post them in ChatGPT. They say now they're not saving that data, but like with ChatGPT, 3.5, they were using all of that to help train the system. So they were storing your data. But ChatGPT 3 is open source with OpenAI, so you can download that. You can install that locally. You can install SageMaker locally. Microsoft Copilot is embedded in your Microsoft tools, but you can then train it to have the same permissions as the user. But it still opens up some issues there because you might not know that you expose like salary data to your whole company, but it sits in some obscure folder somewhere that no one's ever going to hunt for. But if you turn your Copilot onto it and it has the right permissions, and then you go in the chat and you say, how much does a CEO make? But you expose that data and you didn't even know it, ChatGPT will say, oh, he makes $10, right? And so it's really important that you do look at how is your AI being used, and you look at the potential pitfalls of that. And that really comes into ethics, which is really important. There is a lot of ethical issues with AI right now. Governments, fortunately, are starting to solve those ethical issues and do what they're needed for the most, which is set policy. For instance, thinking about vehicles for change here, right? Cars used to not have seatbelts, and then they realized that seatbelts save lives. And so they made policy that it was, law that you had to have a seatbelt. And so, generally now we're doing the same thing with AI. We're figuring out where do we need policy to create laws to make sure that AI ultimately is going to be working for us instead of against us. And you need those regulations. Here's just a list of what different countries are doing as far as regulations. They're just scratching the surface, but similar to cars, we're going to have a lot of seatbelt laws around AI. And the companies themselves producing AI, they want that. Google themselves had AI years and years ago, and then they realized that AI had made its own language and was working in its own language, and they turned it off because it really scared them that AI got so sentient that it was self-aware that it created its own language that humans couldn't even understand. And so they unplugged it. They're like, this is dangerous. We don't know where this is going to go, right? We really need to regulate heavily. And to do that, we really look at what's called cobotics or gating. We don't think we should let AI just run and do its own thing. We think that it's really a partnership in manufacturing. The word comes from manufacturing in terms of cobotics. We really think that humans should work alongside with AI to make their jobs more efficient, but not turn their jobs 100% over to AI without at least gating it, without at least checking its work, making sure it's accurate. We've all heard of the law cases where lawyers try to save some time and say, give me prior case law where X and X happened. And, in AI, it's called hallucinations, and it just made up some case law, and it looked really believable. But at the end of the day, it was making up case law, and the attorney got in front of the judge, and the judge is like, what are you talking about? That is the most fabricated thing ever. And they've, been in jeopardy of losing their license to practice law because they're not gating it. They're not checking the work of AI. So really important that you use AI in a cobotic state. You don't let it replace what you do. Remember, not replace, but displace, so that we can do higher and best use case of our time. Well, thank you very much. That is AI in action with a comprehensive look at education and workforce development. Steve, back to you.
Thank you so much, Todd. That's a fantastic presentation. And, when you talk about generative video and deep fakes, one thing that stands out to me is I really don't think we need deep fakes to hear politicians say absolutely ridiculous things. In fact, we may actually see fakes make politicians more believable. But being said, we have a lot of questions in the chat, one of which comes from someone. They asked specifically about Elon Musk. Elon Musk was quoted as saying we're moving a little bit too fast. We're getting too far down the path of artificial intelligence. And he referenced things like the Terminator movie and things like iRobot back in the day. Curious, Todd, do you think Elon Musk is correct? Do you think we're moving too fast, or do you think it's a pace that's about right?
And he actually went one step further to say that AI is the next atomic bomb. So, really alarming there. It's not that we're moving too fast with AI, because remember, cars came out before we had seatbelts, but we really need to catch up with regulation. We need to make sure we create our seatbelts for AI. It is, there's called an arms race right now in AI, right? Any country right now, doesn't want to get behind internationally. Luckily, the top players in AI right now are, Google, NVIDIA, Microsoft, Apple, and Meta and Google. They're the top, 6 players in AI right now, all US companies. So we're doing a great job there, as far as the AI arms race. But we do need the regulators to catch up. And we as technologists are all willing to, really regulate ourselves. So yes, we're moving fast. I think it's amazing to move fast. I think AI could really help solve some of the world's biggest problems, like, food scarcity and workforce. We just need to regulate it so that in no case it becomes the next atom bomb.
I'll tell you what, can I convince you to stick around a little bit for our panel discussion?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Fantastic. So with that being said, we're going to move on to our first panelist, Lucas Levine. He's the Chief Commercial Officer for Future Fit AI. Lucas, there. Lucas, can you hear me?
I can't now. I might have missed the introduction, but I've got you now.
Not at all. Not at all. I'll tell you what, Lucas, can you tell us a little bit about Future Fit AI role there?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me on the panel today. FutureFit AI is a workforce development technology company that builds products that use AI and data to connect talent with opportunity. So we work primarily with workforce and economic development agencies across the US and abroad, and build products that these organizations make available to the citizens that they serve to support them primarily with career navigation. And so the core product that we offer is an AI-powered career navigation platform that provides a personalized career roadmap for an individual based on where they're at in their journey, where they want to go, and what resources and opportunities might be available to them in their community that can help them get from point A to point B.
Fantastic. So with our topic about workforce development, tell us a little bit about how AI can bridge the digital gap and provide more opportunities for more marginalized communities.
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, AI can be an incredibly powerful tool for expanding the reach of our workforce system. When I say workforce system, we work primarily with literal public workforce development system, but that's also inclusive of all of the other entities, whether those are nonprofits, or like higher education system, our employers. Like we can actually bring those those different groups together in a cohesive way to provide more opportunity for more individuals in each community. And I'll talk about kind of three core ways where we see AI being able to increase access to resources and opportunities. The first is around accessibility. And so there's a reality that existing systems are extremely hard to navigate. If I'm seeking out support from a workforce agency, if I'm trying to find financial aid for a specific training program, typically I am being asked to go through a little bit of a Stone Age kind of a computer system that's going to ask me dozens of extremely invasive questions, demands a lot of time, significant cognitive load, and ultimately leads to a lot of people just dropping out and not getting access to these types of opportunities. And so at a starting point, actually just introducing systems, whether AI or otherwise, that are more modern, that were built on principles of a human-centered design, that kind of remove barriers rather than creating for them for individuals is very important. With AI specifically, I think creating this ability for people to communicate in a way that is natural to them. So, for example, if English is not a person's first language, right, to be able to communicate in a language where they are more comfortable, there are different dialects, certainly adjusting for different reading level, being able to have different modalities. And so whether it's voice to text, vice versa, et cetera, allows more people to navigate through this system, which is one that can be quite overwhelming. I also want to talk about skills, which is really central to the work that we do, and specifically is taking an individual's experience, being able to translate that into the currency of skills, really identify what are the skills that they would have gained from that experience, help them understand in a complex and fast-moving labor market how those skills map up against the in-demand careers, and create a roadmap. So if there's a job they never would have thought of before, hey, well, here is a job you can apply for. If there's some sort of a gap, they have some transferable skills, but there's a few more that they would have to be ready for that career. Let's point them to a training program that can help them bridge that gap, ultimately empowering people with the information that they need to understand where they can contribute to the labor market. And on the flip side, helping employers understand the same. And so making sure that they're not overlooking people who do have skills, even if they might not have the traditional experience or the traditional credentials. So I think a couple things that are really important about what AI is already doing to help more people get access to the system.
Perfect. So one of the missions here at VFD is to ensure that there's inclusivity for underserved populations. How can these AI programs help enhance?
Yeah, and so I probably touched on this a little bit in the previous answer, but I think there's an additional piece around access to information. I think there is a reality that, as I said before, there's so much complexity in a given workforce system, and oftentimes a lot of the programming that's available, whether that's in a nonprofit or government-funded programs or even employment opportunities, they're incredibly siloed. And so if I am an individual who's coming into the system, my options are limited by kind of the first door that I happen to walk in, right? And kind of the knowledge of that individual or the resources that are available to that organization. And so what AI can do is actually, let's bring everything into one place. Let's bring in all the data that we can find on available employment and training opportunities. And again, simplify by, based on what I understand about an individual, their barriers, their interests, their previous experience, across this incredibly complex ecosystem, what are the resources, what are the opportunities that are the best fit for this person, right? And just being able to simplify and provide more access across a wider range of potential opportunities. And then I think it's really important is the same thing happening on the other side. And so you'll have, again, whether it's a training program or it's a workforce development organization, they're understaffed, they're all limited capacity. They're going to go back and often do the same things that have worked in the past, right? We have targets to hit, we have seats to fill, not necessarily doing the hard work to make sure that they are reaching populations that have been historically overlooked. And so to have tooling that does, through AI, that does two things: one, be able to identify those individuals who have potentially been overlooked that might be a fit for a program, and two, is through automation to save so much time automating the more administrative tasks that an individual as a government career advisor might be doing, to free them up to do the more human work, the partnership building, community building, getting out into their communities, and being able to reach, again, populations that just over and over again have been left out of opportunity, especially through the public workforce system.
Yeah, perfect. So before our next panelist, Biax, and I have one last question for you, Lucas. What are the programs and solutions that are up and coming that you're most excited about?
Yeah, maybe there's a couple things I'll speak to there. I appreciate the question, Steve. There's, as I mentioned up front, we work with workforce and economic development agencies across the U.S., also in Canada and in Europe. And oftentimes we're working with local or state workforce agencies is kind of our core partners. And I think one of the things that I've seen is a concept that we always come back to is the idea of moving our system from being supply driven, which is, hey, we've got these training programs out there, we got seats to fill, we're going to funnel people into the same programs that we've had for decades, without necessarily regard to what's waiting for them on the other side, and making sure that there's actually a positive employment opportunity and a sustainable career. And so moving away from supply-driven systems to what we call a more demand-driven workforce system that's really starting with a deep understanding of what the economy needs, what are the occupations that we're facing massive shortages. We're projected to have a shortage of a million nurses in the US by 2030, few million people in advanced manufacturing roles. And so how do we actually start and understand that problem to be solved and point people in those directions? And I'll just cite one example where I've seen this in our work be incredibly successful and powerful, and in large part thanks to the partners that we've been working with, is in the state of Connecticut. We work with the state's Office of Workforce Strategy, and they had a large amount of money in ARPA funds during COVID to set up short-term training programs in high-demand industries that are really targeting that exact set of shortages that they're facing in Connecticut. We helped set up a virtual portal for individuals across the state to find the programs that are the best fit for them and to register through into one of those programs. And the reach has been incredible. So over the course of about 17, 18 months, there have been 23,000 people that have registered through this portal. across the state of Connecticut. Every single one of those people who registers is routed to an agency or a nonprofit partner who's able to provide support in registering for a program, and critically also to be provided with wraparound support. So a lot of people need help with transportation, with childcare, other needs, rental assistance in some cases. And so really the reach has been really incredible. And we're starting now kind of 16, 17 months in to see the outcomes where there've been a couple thousand people who have been trained and placed in sustainable careers in high demand industries. So really excited about the work there. And I hope it's a model combining this demand driven approach where they have deep understanding of what their economy needs and really involving employers in the process and using technology to scale that in a way that hasn't been possible before.
Fantastic. So thanks so much for Lucas. I will ask that you hang on for a little while. We may turn the discussion back towards you. But in the meantime, let's in Bianca Jackson, a VR entrepreneur. Bianca, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, hi everyone. My name is Bianca Jackson. I was the project manager for USA Today's Pulitzer Prize winning VR project, the Wall VR. And so I left my career after that to start a startup in Baltimore City. So we are an award-winning startup, getting recognition from American Express, Comcast, Fiber, you name it. And so for the last several years, we've been operating through the pandemic, just really quietly, just really focusing on virtual learning and engagement. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation today because there's so many applications, those which have been mentioned earlier, but trying to get a little bit into some more details.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I'm curious, Tom mentioned earlier that Google is using AI for direction, for routes. Do you ever use AI to try and find the routes in Baltimore City that have the least number of potholes?
You said the least number of what, potholes?
Yes.
No, luckily, I am a walking citizen of Baltimore, so I have the walking tour down pat.
Fair enough. So if mind, can you give us some examples of where you've seen AI really push the trees and enhance opportunities?
Sure. So that's a great question. One of our clients that we work with through Brick Rose Exchange, we're working with a global nonprofit right now who is serving nearly 200 ecosystem leaders, all from underrepresented and marginalized communities around the world. And so we've been developing, I guess you could say, learning pathways powered by AI. So, really helping specifically on a staff level at this phase of it, and we're going to move down to the members, but helping the staff members really understand where they are and where they could go based on some of their 360 and 90-day plans. So we're really excited about that. The CEO has a really unique environment at her nonprofit, whereas most nonprofits operate like a nonprofit. This operates more like a startup. So it's a different environment, different types of skills and challenges that they faced externally, but internally, just really getting people to shift from how they would normally operate in, let's just say, a corporate environment to like how to operate in a startup environment and be successful. There was a lot mentioned today around just using training in a way, especially when it comes to adaptive learning pathways. And so we're really big in that space, and I'm excited. And then additionally, in talking with the CEO, we've been having conversations around digital literacy. And so using the customized learning paths will help the staff really increase their digital literacy around this stuff, because I think that there's so much information about like what is AI and like the ethics and the bias. And when it comes to marginalized communities, believe it or not, the ethics and the bias conversations are almost 50% of what happens. And so just trying to make sure that we not only introduce the tools and the technology, but also balance potential harm that has already been done and potential harm in the future. So we've seen it operate in that capacity.
Got it. But as an entrepreneur, most of us that are entrepreneurs, it's about solving problems, becoming barriers. And one of the challenges often in underserved populations is about access to technology. And to your point, digital literacy. So how are we overcoming some challenges?
You said, how are we overcoming some of those challenges? Where do we start? I feel like there's so many different ways to overcome the challenges when it comes to digital literacy. But I think even as an example with the nonprofit, a lot of the work that we're doing kind of like is on that workforce development layer of the company for right now. And so as being a member of Baltimore City's Workforce Development Board, we focus specifically on the data committee. And so we've been looking at just different tools to gain insights around like inequities when it comes to workforce development programs. And of course, that's going to reveal just inequities in digital literacy altogether, and being able to take our findings to make improvements, right? And I think that sometimes it's not enough to just get people in a room and say, hey, we think this is a problem. A lot of times the data helps back up, like, this is where we should focus. And so that's a lot of the work that we're working on right now, is just having the data prove out the areas that we should tackle first and kind of go from there. And even going back to the nonprofit example that I was mentioning before, I just literally had my conversation with the CEO and the chief of staff yesterday about this plan of action. And so thinking about what is going to come after tying people's performance to not only just learning or having more literacy in this space, but then also like how it can help them be better employees and actually increase their capacity. And so we're using different, I guess you could say, motivation levers to help with the digital literacy portion of it, to make sure that people aren't just learning to learn, they're learning because this is going to help them evolve as, you know, they grow in their careers.
Fantastic. And before we bring on Lori, I'll ask a question similar to that's Lucas. What are you most excited about? What are the things that really make you interested in the future of AI in the coming years?
Oh, I think Todd kind of knocked it out the park. I'm really interested in the layering of technologies. So a lot of our work had already started in VR. And so within the last year or so, more people have been asking about AI, right? And so there's a project that we worked on that I'm really proud of. A professor from Coppin State University at HBCU here in Baltimore came to us with a very unique problem. He had started a program during the pandemic around youth entrepreneurship, and he felt that engagement wasn't as high as it could be. And also he wanted to figure out like how to scale the program. And so what we were able to do is bring VR together through a digital campus, and then AI through virtual tutors, and kind of combine both worlds together, right? So I'm really excited about, again, the layering of the technology, making sure that we make appropriate use of the technology, because you don't use a hammer for, you know, just different tools. You have a very specific job, right? And just finding ways to make it engaging, scalable, and increasing accessibility, democratizing access to technology. I'm just really excited about everything that could happen. I like to describe the work that we do kind of like Pixar. So people come with like really great ideas, but they don't quite know how it's going to reveal itself on the back end. And so I'm really excited about the layering of the technologies for increased access to technology.
That's fantastic, and I love the Pixar comment that you made. My dog, huge Pixar fan. She likes to watch Monsters Inc. and she calls Sully, the big blue monster, her BFF. For years, I thought she meant best friend forever, but she actually meant her big fuzzy figure. But let's move on. Let's move on to Lori Busman. Lori, are you out there?
Yes,
Lori,
hi. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So you are the chief of staff for Origin, is that right?
I am currently in a dual role. So I am the chief of staff as well as the chief product and technology officer for Origin.
Wow, that's amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do as well as the organization?
Yeah, so Origin is an ed tech company preparing justice impacted individuals for sustainable employment. And what we do is provide career readiness courses, resources, tools for nearly about 100,000 people who are incarcerated in correctional facilities across the country. So I help lead the teams that provide the technology, the product, and the resources.
Got it. So how is Origin leveraging AI in corrections?
So we're leveraging it currently in quite a few ways. We're looking at it just internally. How do we improve our own internal processes? So augmenting our code review process. We use CodeRabbit for that. We're leveraging it to produce training videos and create marketing materials. So ways that we can have our founder's voice go on a lot of our training videos. So it sounds like very authentic and coming from somebody who's founded our company, yet in reality, she doesn't have the time to do all of that. So we're leveraging some of those cool tools and then trying to improve the experience for our customers. So we're testing out some AI tutors to help with some of the coursework that we provide. We're also looking at ways to cut down time it takes for correctional officers to complete investigations. So we have a communications tool, both video and calling. And so our AI tools summarize the calls so that for any investigations that need to happen, officers don't need to spend as much time going through whole transcripts. Kind of cuts to the chase. And then lastly, we're leveraging AI to motivate our individuals as they're working through coursework. So feeling like there's somebody looking and observing and helping you work through is what we're working towards or what we're currently doing. So one thing that we did notice at Origin is if you have somebody working with somebody who is incarcerated, pushing them along, hey, you're doing great. I just saw you working on that course. What's next? Here's a suggestion. Keep going. That answer was really strong. That helps somebody to really feel motivated about the work they're doing and keep pushing on. If they feel alone and nobody's watching, nobody's caring, then less likely to continue coursework to get ready for careers afterwards. And so we realize that that is a great way to improve somebody's trajectory for completing and career readiness. It's also not scalable to do it manually. So we're leveraging AI in a way that we can help motivate and make those human-to-human connections more scalable.
So one of the things we heard earlier is in regards to deep technology. And you had mentioned that you're using AI to replicate or duplicate the voices of some of your leadership. Do you think there's any risks with or otherwise in using AI in correction facility?
First of all, definitely Todd was talking about the human checks and balances afterwards. You can't just assume that AI is going to pop out something that is flawless. So we definitely have to check everything afterwards, leveraging our leadership voices. We've had several mistakes in several languages prior to checking, and so you have to check those over. But yes, some of the risks in general are just that the laws for using AI are still evolving, and public opinion is quite mixed about it. And so on one hand, we want to be a company that is seen as innovative and on the cutting edge of using AI. But then on the other hand, you risk being publicly shamed for using AI. There was an article that was called "Scary and Chilling: AI Surveillance Takes US Prisons by Storm." And so even though sometimes legally you're current laws say that the way that people are using AI is legal and lawful, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily ethical or that people aren't scared of it. And so you can risk some publicity, negative publicity by using it. And that's something that we are working very closely with lawyers and wanting to make sure we're not just making the right legal choices, but what feels ethically right. But that is one of the biggest risks that we are navigating right now, is just the publicity that something could get blown out of the proportion.
And that makes sense. And you've already talked about a lot of efficiencies that are created by using AI. But I'm really curious if you noticed a trend at the end of each person I've spoken with. I've asked, what are you most excited about? So I hope you've had time to think through the question, because I'm about to ask you the same.
Well, I'll do two things. So just internally, I'm really excited to see how we can scale out this, both AI tutorings, AI coaches, and AI mentors, to really see what our incarcerated learners can do and can become with that oversight, with that help, with that tutoring and mentoring. So just the possibilities of where we can go with that is really exciting. And then we're just at the forefront, right? So I have no idea what will be possible in the next 5 years, but I'm just really happy to be along for the ride.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. So I am going to ask Todd to come back and join us because I have one question for Todd. I know we're short on time. But there's this idea that all of these technologies are independent, standalone technology, AI, VR, robotics. How do you see them intersecting at some point? I mean, at some point, will my Roomba have a voice that can talk to me and then tell me that I'm messier in bathroom than I am in my kitchen, or other form of robotics integrated with AI?
I mean, more than likely, your Roomba is going to talk with Siri, and Siri's going to tell you. But they're absolutely coming together. I remember a quick story about maybe 7-8 years ago. I was at a computer electronics show, and they had the first version of Oculus, which actually was one of the co-founders, Brendan Aribi, grew up here in Maryland, and went to University of Maryland and quit his freshman year and ended up going out west to start the Oculus, which pre-production sold for $1 billion to Facebook, Meta now. But at the time, he was just demoing like a really early version. There was also drones that were just starting to emerge. And then there was 3D printing, all completely disparate technologies. That next year, they came together that people were able to make exoskeletons around drones that you could mount cameras and then film 360 degrees that then you could later watch back in your headset. And so now you can, in your headset, you can have in your Oculus immersive experiences that are bitmapped experience from drone filming. So similarly, AI, AR, VR, robotics, there's going to be some intersection there for sure. So, if you think about telemedicine, it's already happening where you can have the golden hands, of Baltimore who needs to do remote surgery on somebody in East Asia. And there'll actually be a robotic arm that exists today that'll start that surgery, but then it'll encounter an issue that, although the robot with AI intelligence can narrowly perform a surgery, they end up opening somebody up and they find out that they have, 3 lungs, right? Like we talked about having 7 or 0 fingers. You might have an, extra lung, right? And the AI and the robotic arm is like, we don't know what to do. They have an extra chamber in one of their lungs. Well, then all of a sudden they'll send a push notification to, Golden Hands back here in Baltimore, Maryland, who will put on his VR headset. He'll be able to get a first-person view from that robotic arm, and he will take over control of that robot to then complete the surgery because he's got a much broader general intelligence on how to, perform a surgery with somebody with, an extra chamber in their lung, right? But so you can see that is a situation where you're going to have AI, robotics, and humans with a headset come together. And there's a lot of those cases. Another example I love is, kids playing video games these days, right? They're playing Grand Theft Auto all day, driving all sorts of cars, and they now have steering wheels and stick shifts and pedals and everything. Well, in the future, you might have a self-driving truck that can go coast to coast, but that last mile is really difficult, particularly if it's mountainous or, snowy conditions or something that the AI can't narrowly tackle. Well, same thing. It'll then tap our kid who's part of the gig economy that one day they're remotely flipping burgers when the machine breaks down. The next day they're docking the last mile of self-driving cars, right? So these technologies are going to absolutely come together, and it's going to be remote work with VR headsets controlling robots that otherwise are autonomous with AI, but need to have an override from a human here and there where it can't generally figure out something because it's narrowly intelligent.
Perfect. And just out of curiosity, out of everything else mentioned, what is most exciting to you about the future of AI?
Well, I've always, thought, everyone's like, save the whales, save the oceans, right? I mean, it's save the humans, right? We need to absolutely save ourselves. We're one of the most destructive forces on this, planet whatsoever. And, but then there's a Maslow law. So, a lot of humans are just trying to provide shelter and food and, and they don't have, they don't have multi-generational, assets and wealth. They don't have great access to school system. They don't have good access to transportation, right? They certainly, struggle to get jobs to, maintain even a minimum wage and a decent standard of living. Well, eventually you'll have our mobile devices, and despite all these, humans potentially on that lower socioeconomic spectrum, they might have, access to broadband issues, but they generally all have smartphones now. Those same smartphones by default will have AI in them. It'll be your guide on the side. And so they're not going to have to go through, rigorous schooling to then set themselves up for a career. This guide on the side, as I mentioned before, will constantly assess their skills and their skills gaps, and then provide just-in-time, real-time training to continue to facilitate that human to get access to transportation or healthcare or proper nutrition, right? And so even where our school systems may not be able to, universally provide great education, to all our, all our citizens, particularly those that are underserved, AI will eventually be right in their pocket, and it'll be constantly providing, really good, direction and guidance, such that hopefully we won't continue to see, the separation of classes that we're seeing now, right? We're seeing eroding middle class, and we're seeing really, an upper and a lower class, right? But I think AI could really be a game changer and a leveling system, provided it's in everybody's pockets. It's universally provided for everybody to really be that game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a reminder to everyone out there in the audience that we do have the live chat up. Feel free to put your questions in there. I've seen a lot of questions about privacy, questions of security, fear-based ideas as well. So I've got one last question for everyone on the panel, and we'll rotate through that question and rotate through the panel. We'll start with Lucas. Lucas, what do you hope we figure out in the next 5 to 10 years when it comes to AI? In your perfect world, 10 years from now, where would you want to be?
I hope we're still around. Really good question. And I think just to echo what Lori said before, I mean, I think that we have any idea what this is going to look like 3 years from now, 5 years from now, I mean, there's going to be an enormous amount that we can't predict. I think certainly when I think in my space, very much focused on kind of workforce and careers and trying to create more equitable workforce, employment, educational opportunities. I think historically we just have not done a very good job of managing disruptive kind of transformational changes to our economy, whether that's technology driven or otherwise, in ways that didn't deepen disparities, that didn't leave some of the same groups behind time after time. And so if I look 10 years out, I would want to see us approach this in a way that looks radically different than we've done in the past, so that rather than kind of to Todd's point, further erosion of the middle class, actually, I've seen articles, I've seen headlines. I hope this is true, that AI can actually help us rebuild the middle class and really serve as a great equalizer. And so that would be my dream, looking about 10 years out.
Fantastic. How about you, Bianca? What's your opinion on this?
Can you restate the question for me? I just want to make sure I'm answering the right thing.
Yep. So the question is, say 5 to 10 years from now, what's the thing you hope AI able to accomplish, and how do we make sure we're on that path?
You said the thing I hope AI will accomplish?
Yes.
I'm going to hope that people accomplish. I hope that people accomplish getting rid of their fear and having way more curiosity around the technology, and not necessarily that they need to understand it, how it works, like every piece of it, but just be comfortable with it enough to just know that it's just going to be a part of society. Like how we don't look, we accept cars because it's a necessity. What I'm seeing a lot of is fear of AI taking my job, fear Terminator showing up at people's houses, and I want them to get rid of the fear and just accept that we are here. AI is not going anywhere. Actually, it's really old technology. It's just more mainstream now and it's more out there. And I just want people to be comfortable with this as our new way of life.
It's ironic you mentioned Terminator. I believe this past week it celebrated its 40th anniversary. So it's appropriate we're having that conversation today. And I'd also throw out there that are there any suggestions you have to help develop soft skills, and how do we use AI to figure out the leadership and soft skills required to rise in our industries?
That's for me.
That's for you.
Or for Lori. I'm sorry. Okay. You said soft skills?
Yes, soft skills and leadership
Oh man, I
skills.
think yeah, so it was really interesting. The nonprofit that I mentioned before, I literally had been working with them before we decided to go into an agreement around AI policy and like initiative within the organization. And I remember having a conversation with her last year around staffing, right? And so everyone always thinks that we need to hire more people. And I said last year, no, we don't. Like we can use tools to increase capacity. And I think within the year, she has grown to the point and seeing just many different examples of how that can happen. And so I say, as far as like soft skills, sometimes we're standing in our own way of our own evolution. And so just being willing to experiment with the technologies and the tools and begin to ask questions of ourselves that will make us a little uncomfortable at first, but then want to explore what is possible. And so really going back to the soft skills, one of the conversations that she and I had was, I said, you know, for me, when it comes to AI and any other emerging technology, this isn't a tech play for me. This is more like a critical thinking play, right? So we're finally at a point in society where people have to get better about how they give something instructions and how do you critically break down what it is that you're trying to generate. And so we're going to see a divide, unfortunately. And I'm hoping that everyone starts to work on their soft skills, not only just with the technology, but also how they show up in their companies and their organizations, because the workforce is going to change. How we work is changing already. And so you're going to need more than just technical ability to be successful in your ventures and in your jobs day to day. But like, how can we become better people? How can we become better people who ask better questions? How can we become better people who give better instructions? And I think that's what you'll see mostly now. And so I'm excited about soft skills revolution for humans.
Yeah, as
I'll
am
build
I.
upon that. Oh, sorry. You can go.
Yes, please, by all means.
So if I think of the future of AI and layering in soft skills for that, I've seen some really cool demos lately of some AI tools where you get interviewed by somebody, you know, or you're getting the first week of work. When we look at preparing justice impacted individuals for sustainable careers, soft skills is a big component of that. It's not just having the technical know-how, but a lot of employers are asking for, how can I guarantee the soft skills are there? And so, yes, you can teach somebody on a document or reading how to learn soft skills, but practice is key with soft skill development. And AI really offers that real-time feedback without necessarily having the manpower of individuals observing you and giving you feedback. But I really like the possibility in some of these tools that I'm seeing of having this AI environment where you can practice your soft skills, practice having a conversation from an interview, first day on the job, to whatever it is, to see where that can evolve.
Totally agree. Do you have any comments, Lori, about where you'd like the AI in the next 5 to 10 years?
No, but I am hoping that legally the laws also catch up so that we feel like we're, as a company, on stronger ground.
Perfect. And last but not least, I'll turn it over to you as our resident and future 5 to 10 years from now. Where do you think we'll be?
Was that directed at me, Steve? I didn't hear.
Yes, sir, it was.
Oh, well, 5 to 10 years, I mean, is a long time when it comes to AI. I can tell you where I hope we are, but I can't necessarily tell you where I think we'll be. I hope that a lot of our issues, both geopolitically, and, socially and socioeconomically, will be mitigated. It seems like in recent years, those issues have been, getting exacerbated. They've been really increasing. As I mentioned, we're getting more separation of the classes. We seem to have a lot more geopolitical struggles these days. Our own, presidency and political structure has been a completely hot mess. And, it always used to be that it was supposed to be every next generation was supposed to be better than the previous, but our life expectancy is now going down over our parents, due to a number of reasons, nutrition and, access to healthy food, being one of them, but environmental concerns, now geopolitical war. There's just a lot of reasons that things have not been improving. So my hope is that in 5 years, through AI, we'll start to see, this back on the up and up, because it's going to help in everything from, healthcare, nutrition, transportation, geopolitics. And, so my hope is that, we eventually can get to a better place than we are today.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to all our panelists that joined us today. It's become clear, more so than anything else, that AI is a tool. And just like any tool, those who learn to use it the best and most efficiently will succeed. So I just encourage everyone to embrace the idea that AI is a part of our society that is not going away. And if you choose to ignore it, you'll probably fall behind in whatever sphere you're in. But there are enormous potentials for AI. And if we embrace the idea that it can be used to really resonate and support underprivileged communities, we can bridge the gap in workforce development. It can do nothing but good moving forward. So if you're wondering how you can help make sure that happens, it's really about supporting organizations like the Schools for Change. They're making really strong advances in this area, and it's a place where everyone can see benefit from it. So again, thank you to all the panelists. Thank you everyone that's joined us today. And if you have any questions, just continue to put them in the chat, as I know our panelists and our guests will continue to monitor it. Take care.
Thank you.